Welcome everybody. I'd like to welcome you to the August 7th City Council meeting, regularly scheduled. If we could all join for the Pledge of Allegiance real quick.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And if we could get a roll call.
Sure. Councilmember Stroman?
Here.
Councilmember Walker?
Here.
Councilmember Engel?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Hagan?
Here.
Mayor Bellinger?
Here. Thank you so much. Before we get started here, I'd like to turn it over to Frank for a little clarification on some rules of communication while we're in during the meeting here.
Sure. You're referring to public comment or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Correct.
So under the Brown Act, just go over some as sort of a primer refresher for the council and also for the public. The public has the right to address the legislative body, which is the city council. The public comment is directed to the legislative body. It's not for staff directly or the other members of the public. The right that's codified in state law is to the council itself. Under our local rules, we've adopted, I think, a 5-minute time limit. So that 5-minute time limit is regardless of the content of the speech. It's just to be applied across the board. And that is for each item that public comment is invited for. You're allowed, public's allowed 5 minutes. As to that item, you get one bite at the apple though, not multiple bites at the apple, regardless of how much time you used. You get one chance on each item for public comment. And then the council, as you know, but I'll reiterate, is not entitled to discuss or take action on any item that's not been agendized. It has to be agendized to have the predicate right to discuss it. And then for public comment from the public comment is meant to address, for the speakers to address the body on matters that are relevant to on the agenda or matters that are relevant to the city. However, that right is not reciprocal. In other words, that is a one-way right from the public to the council. If there are matters that they would like discussion or questions, it's in the discretion of the council to refer those matters to staff for their point of contact at staff to deal with it. But a back and forth discussion is not appropriate for public comment. So I just wanted to clarify some of those things.
Thank you so much. Appreciate that. We're going to start off today with a presentation from Mothers Against Drunk Driving.
Actually, Mayor Bellinger, our chief and one of the recipients of the award were unable to make it tonight.
Okay.
So we'd like to postpone that item to our next meeting, which will be on the 21st.
Sounds like a great idea. Let's do that. All right, next up for consideration is our consent calendar. These items are considered routine in nature and are acted upon by a single action unless requested by an individual council member or member of the public for special consideration. So at this point, is there anything we would need to pull from the consent calendar before we make a motion at the staff or at the council level here? Is there anything at the public out there that want to consider pulling something from the consent calendar? Mr. Danziger.
I'm addressing the minutes, Mr. Mayor, City Council. At the last meeting, I spoke on 2 items. Neither of them showed up in the minutes, and so I'm requesting that the City Council put those back into the minutes. The first one was when staff was discussing surface water and groundwater progress and making it a monthly or quarterly report. I spoke up and said, what was presented to you was, really cloudy. What you need to see are timelines, budget, actual parts of the project that has a scope being completed. I think that's more important to you than just, some verbiage on a page. That was the point, and none of that got into the minutes. I actually wrote down the times because I went back and redid the YouTube. The second thing was when you were going through the LLDs and the proposed budgets and what have you, I addressed the council, specifically Bellaterra, looking to, because there was tree trimming was included as one of the items under the park maintenance, area there. I mentioned that I hadn't really seen that transpire. I wanted to make sure that was happening annually. Again, that did not make it into the minutes, so I would respectfully ask you to direct staff to put those things back in there. If they can't find a tape, I have the actual time of the YouTube, which I can supply to them at your desire.
Last question. What, do you have those times?
Yeah.
You said, can you say them or just give them to
Sure.
staff?
When I spoke on Bellaterra, it was at 50 minutes and 40 seconds, and it ended at 52 minutes and 46 seconds. The scope of those projects started at 21 minutes 20 seconds and ended at 25 minutes 57 seconds. I can use that for reference. Thank you.
Anybody else? All right, and back to the council here for possible action.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent calendar.
Second? As amended.
Yes, sorry, as amended.
So just to make it clear before you finish that vote, if you want I guess we could do it either way, and I'll refer to the attorney. Do you want us to go ahead and make those amendments to the meeting minutes of the last meeting addressing these two items that Mr. Danziger brought up and just keep them approved? Or do we want it to be brought back for review and then approved? Can they do either or?
It sounds like it's pretty discreet enough to find a time and place and insert it, so I think the council, if it wants to direct staff to approve it with the direction it makes those amendments, it can do that.
Okay,
Let's do it that way then.
okay.
Any discussion on that here?
Need a second.
I'll second. Okay.
Well, so we're approving the minutes as amended. We will change them to include Mr. Danzinger's comments. Is that correct?
Correct.
That's what we're voting on right now?
Yes.
All right, so we got a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Carries 5-0. Let's move to staff communications. We have a treasurer's report for June. Are we going to get that potentially?
Thank you, Mayor. As you recall, at the last meeting, the treasurer's report was not included, and so we do have the treasurer's report for June listed this time. We also have our quarterly San Joaquin Council of Governments Citizen Advisory Committee report provided, and then a city manager's report. However, I'll refer over to our department heads first for their updates. So our new development director, manager, Jalen, do you have any updates?
Yes, thank you, Dominique. Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. 3 items today. So first, in my first couple of weeks here, getting out, meeting the council, planning commissioners, recreation commissioners, businesses, members of the public as best I can, and we'll continue to do that over the next several weeks and months. Did want to provide an update on the First Street parking issue. Staff is taking kind of a more holistic look at the issues, not just specific enforcement type issues, but really want to get out and meet with the parties that be out there. I did hold a meeting last week with Larry Grassi, and will over the next couple of weeks hold some meetings with, again, the other parties out there to see if we can come up with a workable solution for all, for the businesses, for the city, for those who need to park there, the customers. So we'll be providing updates as we make progress. And then the last item, one that was kind of provided to me, is the business license home aux streamlining process. Had a chance to go back and watch the video of the meeting in which that item was brought up. Our staff has collected input from other cities on how they handle both of those issues. So we will be putting hopefully an item together for the 8/21 meeting, and shed some light on some of the things that we think we can do in that area. That's it.
And then Chief Flores was unable to make the meeting tonight, and so he has sent to us Sergeant Zambrana. Do you have any updates you'd like to share?
At this time, no.
Okay. Public Works Superintendent Collins?
Yes, I've got a few. Good evening, council. Thank you. So the mayor and I have been
working hard with Caltrans, trying to get an answer on the rework road that we're gonna get on 120. Just this morning, we were able to finally pinpoint a date that we've been promised, the week of September 3rd through 9th. They will be in here in town, hopefully more in the evening times, doing some of the work. Some of it will need to be during the day. But I just want everybody out there to expect on September 3rd to the 9th, Highway 120 will be chaotic. We did request to try to do it in the evening because our industries are, with the tomato trucks and everything else, they understand that it needs to be done in the evening. They tried to get here sooner, but for whatever reason, they could not. But let's keep our fingers crossed that that'll continue to happen. We are going to also want to let everybody know, and the council know, we've had some issues in the last few months at Hogan Park in our restrooms. We've had some unwanted guests that wanted to stay in, which hasn't been too big of a deal, especially because of the weather. We've been able to maintain it. But now they're starting to start fires and things like that. So starting at 11 o'clock every evening, Hogan bathrooms will be locked and will not be unlocked till morning time. Just want everybody that does do the right thing and are expecting those restrooms to be open, that they will be starting being closed tonight from here on out. Also, we were able to address some sidewalk issues around the library. We went ahead and the crew went out and jackhammered quite a bit up and got it all repaved. Report, everything looks really good out there. We've been working with a few business owners adjacent to us in the area that are also going to be addressing there. So hopefully around the library, Coley area, we're going to get some of those sidewalks taken care of for residents that have been over there. Soccer starts this weekend, so hope everybody can come out and take a look at that. Hope we got some kiddos in there. It's going to be warm, so please stay hydrated. We had about 100 more kids sign up this year, so it's going to be a lot busier than usual. So just everybody be respectful of each other's space and time, and hope everybody enjoys it. And just wanted to give a shout out to all the residents out there on National Night Out. It was a great event this year. We had a really good time. I brought my 5-year-old son and got to ride in the fire truck and do all kinds of stuff, so he's pretty amped up. But if there was a competition for streets out there that applaud us when we came in, the mayor, your street was, and you weren't even with us.
I wasn't
so it had
even with
nothing
you on
to do
that.
with you. Man, you've got some wild friends over there. I like to see that. It was awesome. But overall, it was fantastic. It was good to meet some of the people out there, and thanks for everybody that contributed to that. That's all I have for now.
Awesome. Thanks for the update.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. Yeah.
Hey, Justin, quick question. Could you give an update also on that Viking Street leak?
Yeah, so we actually had 2 water leaks on Viking there that were kind of on hold for about 3 weeks. And the reason for is on the last pavement job, Caltrans decided to pave over a valve of ours that we needed to shut the street off. So that was a challenge for us. And also we were dealing some with aging pipe where parts were easy to get. But luckily, with some fingers crossed and the experience of the guys, we just kind of dove in and did some things on a whim, and they did an awesome job getting there and got it taken care of, so it's completed and all put back together now.
Good job.
Thank you.
Thank you. I might just like to follow up on Public Works Superintendent Collins' item regarding the Hogan Park bathrooms. Obviously, we'll be locking them, but if anybody is utilizing them and they see something wrong with them, please report it to us so that if we can have the police department follow up if it's something that we should be filing reports on. And the sooner the better, time period-wise, if we have to do any investigation or whatnot, we encourage that stuff to be turned into City Hall or emailed in however possible.
Very disappointing to hear that's going on in our brand-new bathrooms right now.
I know, it is very
disappointing.
Yeah.
We're better than that, folks.
Yeah, it's, another item regarding the city budget. Obviously, we've had some changes that have needed to be made. The budget we are shooting for the first meeting in September to bring the budget back to council for review and approval. As you may know, the first meeting in September falls on Labor Day. And so when it falls on a holiday, we typically move it to the next day. So it will be on Tuesday, September 5th. And that is the date we're shooting for. I'm pretty positive that is the date. However, if that does change, I will follow up with council and let you know, and then we can make a determination at that point what council's wishes would be on that changing. Another item, city properties. This item's come up a few times on the last few meetings regarding our 18-acre property over off Escalon Balota and the 7-acre property that we have located at Catherine and St. John. Those properties in the past have been utilized as almond orchards, and we were not able to secure a lease with that property owner at that time. I've been working with our city attorney on moving an RFP forward. However, we do have to go through a process in response or according to the state's Surplus Land Act. And so that is a process that needs to be completed prior to the RFP. And so we should have an item ready for the next meeting after that determination is made that we'll bring to council for action, and then we can move forward with those RFPs.
And if I may,
Go ahead.
just to be clear, there are exemptions under the SLA, and that's what we're looking at in order to try to streamline it and get this through so we can move it forward. So hopefully we'll be able to bring something back to the council at the next meeting so you can make some findings to exempt it and you can move forward with whatever you want to do with the property. So that's the issue.
And then update on National Night Out. I was on Group B or Route, was it Route 2?
You're Route 1.
I was Route 1, he was Route 2, so I had the mayor with me, and yeah, we missed the party on his property.
Missed the party
Or
across
in
the
his
street, I
neighborhood.
guess.
But it was a great event. That's one of my favorite events, personally, because it's in the evening and I just get too hot. And so it was a really great time. Everybody was grateful to be there. Lots of kids, lots of neighbors getting together, and it's just one of those things when you're going into people's neighborhoods, and I don't know, it's just very, very special. You see them all getting together and getting along, and sometimes you wonder, if there's always difficulty amongst neighbors, and, sometimes working in city and government, we hear more about the issues neighbors have with each other than how neighborhoods work together, and so I think that's a really great event, and that's what I take from it is people meeting each other and bonding together and working out things together as opposed to fighting. So I really enjoyed it, but my kids didn't get to go this year, which is a little easier. And that is all the items I have.
Great,
Thank
thanks so
you.
much.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
May I ask Sergeant a question?
Sure.
So really, good evening, Sergeant. This is really for Chief, but since you're acting chief, I was approached by a resident that was reading the log for tonight, and there was an incident or two that wasn't noted on the log, but they were aware that it happened. And so they wanted to know how the process was if they read the log and have it added back into the PD report.
That would be upon a records request, so all they would have to do is come into the police department and we would enter things into our records, so it is in the log.
Can you repeat that?
If anything is missing from the log, it would have to be going through our records department, so anything that needs to be added in or needs to be altered, changed, that would be through our records or through our dispatch.
I don't think it's on the log line by time, just on the report that's chief's report that's on the city council agenda. So
Was it an actual report?
I don't know.
Sounds like it's the monthly report where he lists the incidents.
That could be altered. I'm not exactly sure how chief would do it, but usually when information needs to be redacted, he can do that as he pleases.
I'll just advise the resident to follow back up with chief.
Yeah.
I can also follow up with the chief as well and find out
I'm
about
assuming
that
that
item.
report is just a highlight of some of the things they deem to be the most important.
Not every
Not
single.
every single one, but that's an assumption on my part currently.
I can follow up and find out.
All right, next up are matters presented from the audience. The public may address the city council on any item that is on the agenda at the time the item is called. The public may also address the city council on any item not on the agenda that is within the subject matter of the city of Escalon. Each speaker is limited to a maximum of 5 minutes. Unused time may not be yielded to another speaker. You may state your name and address for the record, however, it is not required. Due to state law, action will not be taken on any item that is not on the agenda, and except for brief responses, the council is prohibited from discussing an item not on the agenda. If it requires action, it will be referred to staff and/or placed on a future agenda. The determination of whether an item is within the subject matter of the city is at the discretionary decision made by the mayor. And with that, we'll open up to the public. Anybody who's got any items they would like to discuss that are not on the agenda.
I'm Ann Shaddix, and I have an issue to bring that I personally don't know what to do with, so I'll have to ask the council to decide. A couple families approached me about the skate park, and they wanted to know exactly, they said that they had worked at fundraisers and so forth since 2012. They want to know how much money is there, how is it spent, or if it's been spent. If not, is it invested? What's happened with the money? It's not an aging issue, so I really can't address it myself, but I told them I'd bring it to the council, ask the council if they would consider making that and a report at one of their future meetings so that the community knows what's going on with the skate park. Thank you.
Thanks. Anybody else? Anybody online that would currently like to ask a question or have a comment? Not hearing none, we'll go ahead and close matters presented from the audience and move to item number 5 on public hearing. Consider and rule on the appeal filed by Samuel and Stephanie Orlando for a conditional of approval imposed pursuant to the Planning Commission approval of variance amendment 23749B.
Mr. Mayor, I'll have to excuse myself as I was seated on the Planning Commission during that decision.
All right,
As will I.
all right. We'll take a break, gentlemen.
Thanks.
Are we ready?
I believe that's you, Jalen.
Okay. Good evening, Mayor and remaining council members. Jalen French, Development and Community Services Manager. So as was read, the item before you tonight is to consider an appeal of condition number 3 in regards to fencing related to a variance that was approved by the Planning Commission in August 2021 and then amended by the Planning Commission in June of 2023. So a little more detail on that item. The Planning Commission in August of 21 approved variance number 21-749 to reduce the required off-street parking spaces by 5 from 49 to 44. That was approved on a 5-0 vote. During the meeting, they added a new condition, the Planning Commission added a new condition regarding a replacement barrier, referencing the wood fence that was in between the proposed use, Orlando's Market, and the adjacent residential property. So the condition read, the applicant shall work with city staff and the adjacent property owners to the west to ensure the replacement barrier will meet municipal code requirements for materials, mitigate noise, and be aesthetically pleasing. So that was the condition in August of 2021. It is our understanding that subsequently Orlando's Market and the property owners of the adjacent property did coordinate, but could not come up with an agreeable solution on the wall or fence. So in April 2023, the project proponent, the Orlandos, filed an application to amend the variance in that specific condition to remove the requirement to replace the existing fence. On June 13th, 2023, the Planning Commission heard that item and did amend the condition to read, as long as the adjacent property to the west is utilized as non-conforming residential, then the fence along the western property line shall remain in place. If the fence needs a replacement, it shall be constructed with compliant materials listed in the Escalon Municipal Code. So a couple weeks later, the project proponent on June 26th submitted an appeal to the Planning Commission's decision on that condition. And so we're here tonight, according to the Escalon Municipal Code, the council can and does weigh in on appeals to actions by the Planning Commission. So a little in regards to what the code says about fencing in between commercial and residential zones and in each of those zones. So in the Escalon Municipal Code, in section 17.41.030D, where a residential use exists on a lot in a non-residential zone, so the house is on a commercial zone, the fencing requirements for the R1 residential zone shall apply. So the current fence meets the requirements of the R1 zone, but the R1 zone doesn't require fencing. It regulates fencing, height, if a permit is needed, materials, that type of thing. It doesn't specifically require a fence. So when we look at the commercial zone, another section in the Escalon Municipal Code, in all other zoning districts, no walls or fencing is permitted within a required front yard, side yard, adjacent to a street or alley, or that portion of a required rear yard, except a wall or fence no higher than 30 inches may be constructed to screen parking lots. So fences, walls are not required, and in fact, not even desired really in commercial zones. And so the subject of this appeal, as submitted by Orlando's Market, is this is 2 commercial zones. We shouldn't have the requirement of a wall, as we understand the application that was submitted. And then it goes to replacement. I think, again, as submitted by the applicant is happy to repair the fence that is there existing, but doesn't want the long-term requirement to replace that fence should something happen, at least not sole responsibility for that requirement. So just of note, if the council does elect to keep the condition or amend the condition in any way that would require a fence, we would recommend that the council consider the responsibility of the cost of that fence and who that cost fully lies with, just to cover all bases and all future actions that may apply under a condition like this. So with that, we would be happy to answer any questions that the council may have on that item.
All right, so at this point, I believe we need to open up the public hearing on this. So it is now 7:29. We'll open up the public hearing on this and hear from Orlando's Market first, I would imagine. So if we have a representative for Orlando's Market, if you could come to the podium.
Good evening. Thank you, Jalen, and City Council. Pretty much the way Jalen said it was correct, just for a few, except for a few things. So we appeal the determination of the Planning Commission that amended condition number 3 relating to the project remain as a condition of approval. We ask that the council vacate conditions of approval number 3, requiring the existing 6-foot fence along the west side of the project remain in place as a condition of the project. Our concern, Stephanie and Sam, Orlando, our concern is our project is a permitted use under the city's zoning ordinance. Likewise, Escalon Municipal Code Chapter 17.41.030, entitled Fences, Hedges, and Walls, does not require any fencing along property lines in a commercial zone. The staff report acknowledges these facts. The purpose of a variance is to allow a property owner to deviate from a required zoning or development code requirement for the zoning classification. In our case, the project complies with the zoning code and the City Municipal Code Chapter 17.41.030 requirements. As the project meets the required City of Escalon standards, there is no need for or basis upon which condition number 3 should continue to be required. Therefore, we are requesting City Council grant our appeal and remove condition number 3.
Okay. Any questions?
I don't have any questions.
I've got
for him at this time.
a couple questions, or at least one anyways. Is it the intention, if a variance is removed, this is removed, is it your intention or the intention of the Orlando's Market to remove the fence before we open? Or is it an intention to keep the fence up until it falls apart and then remove it? What kind of intentions or thoughts did you have on the fence at
Well,
all?
there's a fence that is existing. And I think it's my intention that, I don't know that a variance is the right answer to any of this, because per your own codes, they're not required, commercial to commercial. So, long-term, I mean, who knows what happens next door to me? I mean, possibly the property is sold, and in many cases, neighbors come to each other. I've done this in the past. We do shared parking, so all kinds of things can happen. And it just seems that a variance, when I've met all the zones classifications, and we're strictly talking about fences here, not noise or anything else.
Right.
Okay, we're compliant with everything, so I just don't understand the reason for a variance. I don't have a good answer for you,
Okay,
as far as my intentions. I mean, my intentions are to get the store open.
well, thank you for that.
Thank you, that's my intention.
Is this a financial decision, or I'm kind of trying to figure out myself, why you don't want to be neighborly potentially to your neighbor if you have people staying there?
Well, let's remember now, no fences are required there, but but
you're
a
asking
neighbor could
for
put a fence up too. So,
Yeah, so have you guys spoke together about
so,
this?
okay, so Joel and I met, we talked about this, the planning commission, probably 5 or 6 times. I brought to Joel 2 or 3 different options, and he unfortunately could not get his team to agree to anything. In fact, I never got a yes or a no. Multiple phone calls, multiple site visits, toured him through the inside of the store. We gave it our best shot. We honestly did. Different materials, and again, never a no, or it was always a, I don't know, my wife can't decide, we're not sure. And so after that happened, I decided to appeal the decision because we were getting closer to opening, and I didn't want this to become a problem. And now I'm just days away from opening. And when I look at the use of the property, it's the same use. And so I just don't think that a fence should be there in perpetuity or not. I think the code speaks for itself.
I understand what you're saying. Would you be open to the city mediating between you two to figure out an actual real game plan there? The reason I ask or say this is, it's, to me, if you have people living there, and regardless of how you're zoning it, that place there, people have been living there for a long, long time. And now you're talking about a 24-hour facility versus something that was open through the day. You're going to have lights and noise, and that's, I don't care what direction your, pumps are facing, that's just reality. I think it's neighborly to think that you're going to at least have some sort of agreement on a fence line together. And I get what you're saying, I understand your argument, but it just seems that you two should be able to get together and, make a neighborly decision together.
Sure, and I think Diana said it best earlier. Sometimes, National Night Out was the best of communities getting together versus sometimes people just can't agree. Not because we don't like each other, we just can't agree on this issue. I would also remind you that, my neighbors have been there for 20, 30, I don't know how many years, but there's never been a noise complaint filed against that property. So why would I be any different? I'm the same use. You could say I'm 24-hour, but how many of the gas stations have had a noise complaint? None. I mean, again, noise isn't really part of what I'm here to talk about. So sometimes we get caught off, we get this third, fourth time I've been here, noise becomes an issue. But pumping gas and going to a grocery store is really not a noisy proposition. And again, there's been no noise complaints on that property from the toys. I talked to Mike and Bob.
It sounds like you're not fully committed to the fence, though. I guess
I'm not committed to the variance.
Okay, because my concern is if you, at some point, take that fence down, now you're wide open right into someone's
Right.
bedroom.
Right, and the adjacent property owner has the same rights and privileges that I do.
It just seems like you guys should,
Andrew, I hear you loud and clear.
Figure it out.
I just feel that the variance is placed on one property, but not the other. And they have the same rights and privileges that I do. And I mean, this project is 100% ADA, the latest and greatest that's possible, because we're going through the permitting process right now.
it looks awesome.
Oh, I appreciate that. I appreciate that. Thank you. We're trying, trust me. And I just feel that, you know, this variance isn't, I mean, per your own code, it's not necessary. I mean, unless Jalen has,
Wait, may I ask a question?
sure,
So Joel, is that the neighboring property owner? Is that who we're referring to?
Yes.
Okay. And then the fence, that's on the neighboring property?
On my
Or is
property.
that your property?
Yes.
So is your intention to take the fence down or leave it up until something happens and then your
I
intention is?
wasn't really even thinking about the fence until the variance was placed upon me. The fence that's there is fine. It was paid for by the previous property owners, so I inherited it. I don't see the reason to take it down. It's just hard to have a variance that runs with the land when I am a conforming use and my neighbor's legal non-conforming. It just seems that we both have the same rights and privileges, but I'm being forced to maintain a fence just because I happen to buy a property and the fence was on it.
And it is on your property. How far is the property line from that fence to the neighbor's fence? Like how much property?
It's an adjacent
I
fence.
mean, it's
Yes.
on the property line.
I can't tell you if it's on the property line, but it's our,
But it's your property.
yes,
I mean, it's
correct.
not the neighbors.
No.
Who's living in the residential non-conforming.
I think it's a shared, it's like any neighborhood
Yeah.
fence. It's
Like a neighborly
kind of a split.
It's on the
So it's on the, that's what I'm
Presumed to
asking.
be
So
on
it
the
is on the property line?
I believe so.
Do we have a representative from the neighbor today?
I don't know if it's on the property line though.
No.
Yeah,
It looks like it.
yeah. Well, we
From our
can survey.
Okay.
We get surveyed.
Yeah.
And then code, just so I understand, code is saying that if you are a residential in non-conforming in a commercial lot, residential, you still do need to have a fence up. Is that correct?
No,
No.
that's not correct.
Oh, it's not.
No.
So our municipal code only regulates fencing if you are going to put one up. So if you want to put up a fence, then we have regulations on how you can put up that fence, setbacks, height, et cetera. But nowhere in our code does it require fencing unless it's two different zones next to each other. So if you were a commercially zoned property developing next to a residentially zoned property, they would be required, our municipal code requires an 8-foot masonry wall in that circumstance, which I'm using as an example. However, both of these properties are commercially zoned, and our code specifically states that zoning, because they're the same zone, even though the residential use is non-conforming on a commercial property, if the fence is not required. But it's obviously there, it's existing.
It seems logical to me that you'd keep the fence there, and when it comes time to fix the fence, or something happens to the fence, that you both pay equal parts to fix the fence.
So that has been a negative. In meeting with the neighbor, zero interest in spending any money. Zero.
I would think that,
So, again, this is why I'm here, because again, per your code, I'm not required. Now, am I gonna tear the fence down tomorrow? No. But by the same token, there hasn't been a relationship established yet in order for us to do that. So I just want to be even, Steven playing field, based off of the zone classification for my use and the municipal code for fencing.
we have somebody from the neighbor that is here to represent that neighbor that could speak on this topic. I'd like to hear from the neighbor as well.
My name's Joel Carlson. I own 2222 Jackson. We were residential there before it was commercial. City of Escalon makes it commercial, that doesn't make us commercial, because we were residential until my building falls down or I sell it. I'm still residential. He's commercial. When Big Boy built their store there, they put up the fence. My grandmother owned the property at the time. They were so nice to her that they put in a gate for her to walk through that fence to go shop at their store. Well, Big Boy, back in those days, was only open until 6 o'clock. Then when they upped their hours, they were open till 7. Not all 24 hours a day, a night, all night long. The noise mitigation, he makes it sound like there's going to be no noise. Well, what happens when a Harley pulls in there? Hot rod or multiple vehicles, trucks. There's noise. You said there needs to be a noise barrier there. Well, doing nothing does not mitigate that noise whatsoever. I'm still residential. You guys can say I'm commercial. Everybody in that circle there on Ivy Lane, we're residential. We have no businesses there. Nobody's operating a business. It's commercial, it's residential. That's all I have to say.
Any questions?
Are you open to sit down with Mr. Orlando to figure out a?
He says we never could come to an agreement. When I agreed on an 8-foot wooden fence, he says the city has to have an engineered drawings and stuff. I don't want to spend the money on that. And then there was, okay, what about a 7-foot fence? I know you don't have to have an engineered drawings, but city has required drawings for a 7-foot fence. Well, he didn't want to do that. So it's his word against my word on what we would agree on. It came down to where he didn't want to do anything. So you can either believe him or you can believe me. I don't care if
I don't think it's a matter of believing either one of you is trying to figure out a game plan that, you know, I mean, you're sharing a property line. You're clearly neighbors.
Is on his property.
Well, regardless, you're sharing a property line.
Yeah.
And I think the neighborly thing to do would be to come to agreement together on that. It's just my opinion, you know.
It's a shared fence as if you had two residents next door to each other. Are you unwilling to pay for half a fence if it falls over? To replace sections that fall down as if it was two homes?
If he doesn't want to do anything, if it came to it, I would put up my fence. I mean, if he wants to go the cheap route, well, we can do that.
That's
where we're at.
That's what I'm looking for.
May I suggest something? In light of the, I guess I would just say in light of the regulatory teeth in our code that would require a fence in this situation, yeah, to be honest, it's a weird situation in our code because our code would normally require some kind of mason wall or other kind of fence when you go from one zone to the next. Here, it's technically both commercial zone, but it's a completely different use on the other end. The built environment looks as though it's a residential zone and a commercial zone next to each other. We don't have that. We don't have that, anything in our code to address the situation when you have a legal non-conforming residential use in a commercial zone next to a commercial use in a commercial zone. So that's kind of the twilight zone we're in, to be honest. Now, let's take away since we don't have a legal requirement that's clear in our code that's required, the thought was to condition this variance with this requirement. But by conditioning it to require the commercial property owner to maintain, as I understand the current condition, to maintain and pay for it, you're, in some sense, advantaging the residential property owner in a way that no other residential property owner would have the benefit of if there was any other fences on any shared property lines. I mean, the idea is you're 50-50. You're in on it 50-50. And what's good about that is both have skin in the game from an investment perspective, financial perspective. So if one has to pay for 100% of it, the other one can ask for the Taj Mahal fences, right? And they don't appreciate the externalities because those externalities are being shifted to somebody else, not themselves. So all I'm trying to say is this. One option for the council to consider is removing condition 3. This is the council decision. I'm not making any recommendation, just helping you see the full orb here. If you remove the condition, and that essentially forces these two parties to do what you want them to do voluntarily right now. Because then when the fence does fall down, 10 years from now or whenever, the parties are gonna have to actually meet and confer and figure it out. Because the residential property owner won't want the fence down. The commercial property fence owner has a duty because it's on the fence line. It's on the property line. So to me, it may create the natural result that you're looking for them to voluntarily agree to. I think right now the current condition, as putting it all on the commercial property owner to maintain it, gives one of the parties basically the opportunity to.
If you pull that and can you go ahead and require that they both pay equal parts to fix a fence in the future?
You
That
can't,
option.
you can't condition the residential property owner to do anything because he has no permit or application before this council. You can say, as part of the variance condition, that the commercial property owner is responsible for 50%. That would be the other option. But then, and that necessarily puts the other 50% on the residential property. So those are the two ways to do it. Maybe it's 6 1/2 dozen. You can take it out and force the parties to naturally meet in the middle on something like that, or you can condition the property owner to be responsible for 50% of future costs. But I don't think you can require the commercial property owner to be responsible for 100%.
I understand. And my concern, Mr. Orlando, if you want to come up. My concern was that Mr. Orlando isn't committing to that future fence, unless I'm misunderstanding.
I think you're misunderstanding. I think he's on the right track. The point I was trying to make is that how can you make it a condition of the commercial property owner who's legally conforming, but that part doesn't matter. The fact that we're both commercial, why should one side be saddled with any responsibility more so than the neighbor when exactly what was going to happen tried to happen? I was at his mercy, which is why the planning commission dropped that part of it, because he can ask for anything, and I don't have any, I'm buttonholed. It doesn't make it equal. The best way to make it equal is I want a fence between our property. Sure I do. Joel wants a fence between our property and his property. So then we can come together. But right now, it's only one way, and I have to agree, the way it was written, I had to agree, it was my nickel, but he got to decide. That's the way it went down, and that's what we're trying to avoid.
Gotcha.
Now, if Joel was to call me someday and say, Sam, I'm going to, we're going to move, whatever, would you like to buy this place? And if I'm in the position to do it, then yes, I would. And if I developed it with an adjacent type use, there would be no fence required, just like there currently are no fences required when there's two properties side by side that are commercial. I'm the most logical buyer when the day comes. So I think Frank said it better than I could.
Well, I mean, I could be wrong, but I think what I'd want to make a motion for is.
Let's make sure we get the rest of the audience that might have any comments on this first.
Sorry.
No, that's good. I'm okay. But is there anybody else in the audience that would like to speak to this topic before we bring it back to council?
Kurt Danziger, 389 Noni. I like what Frank said, and the other thing that Mr. Orlando's leaving out is just runs with the property. If you make him responsible for the fence that he's not responsible for, then he, any other subsequent property owner, is responsible for that fence. If it were me, I'd take the fence down. If that's his fence, you take it down. There's no requirement for the fence. So I don't know if the Planning Commission was briefed adequately to make the kind of decision you're basing here tonight. It doesn't sound that way. It sounds much better the way Frank had put it. But to get these sides together, you know, make sure he's not liable for it to run with the property, and then if worse comes to worse, take the fence down. If he wants a fence, he can put up a fence, right? Nothing stops the property owner from putting up a fence, and if it's 7'9", you don't need a permit, right? That'd be my thought.
Anybody else out there that might have a comment or concern or question for us?
I'm going to put on my retired real estate appraiser hat. You've got commercial property and commercial property. It doesn't make any difference what's on that property. You can have a house, you can have a dog kennel, whatever. It's still commercial property, and they must fall under the commercial property rules. You know, person has a residential use permit, no problem. He's still commercial. And that's how I'm looking. That's how I look at it as an appraiser. They're both commercial, period.
Okay, anybody else? Just going to bring it on back to council here, and
Forget online.
oh, is there anybody online that would like to speak to this topic? Somebody dropping off or coming in?
You're good.
All right, haven't heard anybody from there, so let's bring it back to council for discussion.
And just to be clear for the record, you are closing the public hearing and
Yes.
public comment?
Sorry, yes, closing the public hearing at this point. Thank you.
At this point, or?
At this point, we're closing the public hearing.
Okay,
Bring
okay.
it to council for,
Does that mean you're gonna reopen it up, or you're?
no,
Okay.
it's not my intention.
Sorry, I'm a lawyer, I always hear squishy words.
May I ask a question of staff?
Yes.
So I see how that it's written, if the fence means replacement, it shall be constructed with compliant materials listed in the Escalon Municipal Code. Is this like a masonry wall that a commercial property would typically have to use? Or would that be compliant material like a residential fence and you can replace that with a wooden fence? So that's my question. I would hate to put a masonry wall between commercial and commercial. I don't want to discourage commercial development. I also don't want to, harp on the rights of this family as well, who have lived here for years and years and years and would like to keep the fence. So would it need to be replaced by like masonry, or would it just be the?
So the code refers where residential use exists on a lot in a non-residential zone. The fencing requirements for the R1 residential, so single-family residential zone shall apply. So that's your typical wood fence, not a masonry fence in this case, not a masonry wall, excuse me.
Does it seem logical to do pull the variance, but at the same time require the commercial to pay 50% of the fence?
I'm not sure I'm willing to do that. I think we remove it completely, and if they can't come to a conclusion when the fence is falling over, the fence doesn't get replaced, or they work it out. Just like if me and my neighbor get in an argument about a fence falling over, who pays for it? Somebody's gonna make a decision sooner or later, either put a fence up or the 2 yards are together. It's commercial to be developed. I don't think we should saddle anybody with any restrictions or obligations. It's two neighbors working out a problem. And if it's not required, then for me, it's two commercial properties, you don't put a fence up at all if it falls down and nobody's can work something out. I believe that you say you want a fence in some form, so if that's the case, then work with them. If you can't come to an agreement, then if the fence is down, the fence is down, and there's no fence at that point, because it's a commercial property. I wouldn't want to saddle any conditions on it myself. concerns, questions, comments?
I tend to agree. I mean, I empathize. I would love, I see why the wall is needed for the residential purposes and want to see the wall up. However, I don't see it as the commercial owner's responsibility to keep that up. So I think removal might be something that we should consider so that they can work it out.
Just remove the clause completely.
Right.
Is my thought.
Yeah, I'm at a point where I feel like there has to be some way to force them both for a 50% split on it.
I think that would naturally occur if there's a fence down and there's a backyard it's exposed to public and animals or whatnot, or commercial not wanting that as well. Visually, aesthetically, I'm sure that you don't want to see the backyard of somebody's property as well. So I would assume, based on what I've seen myself, that I wouldn't want to require anybody any restrictions at all, as it is both commercial for me.
Yeah. It just doesn't seem like these two gentlemen are amicable to that, so.
I think that would get a little bit different if the fence is down, there'll be an agreement of some sort come to happen. With the fence just sitting there now and it's up, there's no reason to move, but fence is down, I think there'll be a better communication between the two parties, and if not, that's what civil court's for, I guess, if that's what's so needed. But if we don't have a restriction there, it's between them at that point.
And just to be clear, even though there's just a quorum of 3 of you, it doesn't require 3-0. 2 of 3 on a vote will be sufficient to take any action.
Any other questions or concerns we got? Or a motion to be had?
My hope is that this family continues to live peacefully in their residential unit in a commercial lot until they decide to sell or rid of it. And at that point, it hopefully encourage commercial development, which is what we're trying to get along Highway 120. I don't want that to happen today. I want them to peacefully live in their home right now, but putting up a masonry wall or putting up something that's more permanent is going to discourage that commercial development. And so that's the intention of my vote today.
So I guess we need a motion then?
So I put the procedure up on the screen. So the council may affirm or reverse the planning commission's action in whole or in part. The council should not be limited in its review of that portion of the action complained of, but may also consider the entire matter, and in doing so may modify, add, or delete conditions as it deems necessary or proper.
Okay. I'd like to make a motion to remove that condition upon that property in its entirety with no restrictions. This is my motion on the table.
I will second that motion.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Nay.
Motion carries 2-1. We could go get our other 2 council members at this point. Welcome back, council members. We are moving on to item number 6, recommendation to adopt resolution number XX23, adjusting the user and regulatory fees for various city services. Over to staff for item number 6.
Thank you. So this item before you actually is from the last meeting. We discussed it, and I basically put a pre-review for council because in the past, there has been concerns of not having enough time to see those fee increases. We want to provide council with that kind of time to be able to dive into things and take a good look at everything. So this item was scheduled for its public hearing. Some comments that were made at the last meeting. The largest one, or the one that came up and was talked about the most, was fee comparisons to other cities. Essentially, the document being very large, which we have called it our master fee schedule. It wasn't always like that. We have multiple departments, and basically it was efforts from staff to consolidate it all into one document so that all of us could find the most current fees and make sure they were all being updated appropriately, as some of them are on different schedules than others. So at the last meeting, we had provided the entire master plan, but then after receiving that type of feedback, we went ahead and updated what we provided council tonight with only the fees that are subject to this increase. At the last meeting, we provided you an entire copy of the master fee schedule, which included all of the city's fees. However, fees such as development impact fees, I think there were some water fees, garbage or refuse fees were also included in there because it's all, we have put it together as one schedule for staff use. Those items were not being adjusted, and if you looked at the right-hand corner, it would say not applied or NA. So we did remove those to avoid any confusion. We want to make it clear what fees are specifically being adjusted. So the section, the item you have now has the fees that would actually, if approved, receive that CPI increase. So we reviewed, the background on these fees, and that we've done a study on these fees back in 2018, and that was when we did a comprehensive cost of service study. This is an annual CPI study. We are due to be conducting another one of those service studies soon, and so we're looking to do that, as relatively possible as we have staff coming on and addressing that matter. But this is the CPI increase. So what we did have was have staff look into fee comparisons. We realized our master service fee was a large document. So cities that were reached out to were Newman, Houston, Firebaugh, Sonora, Ripon, Waterford, Livingston, and Gustine. Out of the 7 cities, only 2 of them have actual master fee schedules, like Escalon, which are Gustine and Newman. They're also very similar in size to us. Newman being a little bit larger than us. The other cities had their fees spread throughout multiple different documents, and when staff was discussing them, they're definitely more departmentalized to where if you wanted to know the community development fees, you had to contact that department. Whereas here, you could ask somebody in the finance department what a fee is, and as long as they have a master fee schedule, they're able to provide you that fee if asked. Those 2 cities that had the master fee had categories. The categories that we shared in common with both of those cities were community development fees, engineering and encroachment permit fees, police fees, animal control fees, and water fees. The city of Newman included business license fees and nuisance abatement fees like we also have. And the city of Gustine included building permit fees like we also have. Those 2 cities both have fire fees, which obviously we do not have because the fire department is a separate entity from the city. Gustine also had aquatics fees and facility rental fees, and then their recreation fees were separated out. And we, as Escalon, combined our aquatics fees, facility rental fees, and recreation fees, and we put them under a title called Culture and Leisure, so they're a one-stop shop for those type of fees, all on that one page. Newman also has finance and administrative fees, which we also carry as well. So the fee categories that Escalon does have that the other 2 cities did not have in response to this survey, were special events fees, electronic advertising, electronic sign. We have an electronic sign, so we have advertising fees set up for that. Public facility storage fees, because we also offer public facility storage in the back of the police department. And then there are refuse service fees, which is with our contract company, Jilton. And that's a specialty because it's subject to a franchise fee where cities can set up their franchise agreement differently. And so it can be that where Jilton is charging them directly. It just depends how your agreement is set up with your garbage company. So What staff's determined when it comes to our schedule of fees is that for transparency purposes, we have everything laid out in that schedule. And so if they're looking for that type of fee, or they're looking for a fee, all of those fees are located in this one master schedule of fees, which I guess does seem lengthy, but it's there. And if it's not there, that means it's not created. And as I pointed out previously, that's one of the main reasons we did that as staff. And it was more recently, probably 3 or 4 years ago, where it was departments all having different fees. Some of them get updated in January, the calendar year. Some of them get updated July 1st in the fiscal year. And it was bringing them all together to make sure they're all on time and being implemented, especially in response to staff turnover and things changing inside the city, making sure that we're staying on top of those type of things. So another arrangement in response to our master fee was that because we separate them out by department, each department's on its own separate page, so you may have a page for public facility storage. It has 2 fees listed on it, but then the entire remainder of the page is blank. And so if we were to consolidate them and just run them simultaneously, you might actually have 9 or 10 pages taken out, but we try to keep them clean and cut so that maybe if somebody comes in and only asks for garbage fees, we can print that copy and just provide them the sheet that says garbage fees. And so that's the reason it was created that way. Another item that was pointed out by staff was that although most of the smaller cities in our area do not have a master fee schedule, in the search shows almost all of the mid-size and larger cities in the state have them, which could be looked at as putting us ahead of the curve because organizational-wise, we're organizing ourselves like a larger city, trying to compartmentalize and keep things organized, whereas in other cities, things could be lost amongst the mix. And so it does seem more professional in staff's opinion to have it all in that one place. So I do have copies of the fee schedules. So this is our fee schedule, obviously. We don't need to look at that one again. This is Newman's fee schedule. And so I would say that ours is much easier to read. That's just a personal opinion. No. And so as you go down, you're just essentially, they go by section and then they have their fees. And then they also have fines listed depending on what type of fee. They're going over the fee, fines, whether if it's administrative citation related. And then there's their master fee schedule where they have animal services, and then they separate it out by kennel licensing, license fees, livestock fees, miscellaneous, and then they do move right into the other department, business license and permits. You're going down document reproductions, facility rentals, and so it is more consolidated of sorts where there isn't that empty space on each pages, and so that can be addressed or adjusted. Planning services, and they list them out. As I indicated at the last meeting as well, the fee study is mainly used by staff. It's to help staff identify what the fee is for the service that's being requested or asked. So it's not necessarily a document that a person in the public's going to go to refer to. Most people are going to call into City Hall and ask the specific fee for what they're looking for. So if they're calling in and want to know what the water fee is, they're going to probably call City Hall and they're going to ask, and then we'll give them that fee. Whereas this schedule is, I would say over 90%, where staff utilizes it to be able to make determinations on what we should be charging for what services. And so we have, as indicated last meeting, come back to councils, advising that we need a certain fee, or that we're being asked to provide a fee, or you've had members from the public approach council saying, you don't have a fee established for this. I don't want to pay this enormous fee when I'm only asking for this. And past councils have indicated to staff, let's reevaluate that and establish a fee for that so that nobody's paying more than they should have to pay for that service. And so we've done that as well. So that was Newman, and then we have pulled up Gustine. And Gustine, has their master fee, same thing, and as you could tell by the way it looks, they also utilize the same consultant. Matches ours almost exactly. And so at the front of the page, they indicate the page number and the type of fees that you'll find, and so right away, if you're going to that table of contents, you can look it up. If you have a building permit fee, you're gonna know to pull to page 14 and go look up the building permit fees. And so from then on, you know, if you're a contractor especially, you know, and you're gonna pull a license for a permit, you're gonna know what type of permit you're pulling. I need to do residential solar. Oh, okay, and my permit's less than 10 kilowatts, $306, because that's the fee that's established there. And so companies and such are more familiar with using the fee schedule. Individual people, not necessarily as much. So I just wanted to point that out. And so if you're going through this fee study, or the schedule of fees, I mean, very similar to how ours is done. And they have it spaced out as well. And so I don't know if you have any other additional comments related to this. But that was the information that we looked up. So some other items that had come up about the fee schedule included that there's recreation fees for the pool and like aquatics and stuff still listed. Those continue to be listed because we haven't moved yet on where we're going with the swimming pool as of yet. And so staff didn't want to remove those because we just don't know where it's going. They can always be removed, but when you do remove them, then you have to reestablish them. And for now, we feel like they should just be left there for now until we get there. Other items that were brought up was business license. Manager French indicated, you know, we'll be working on business licenses and possibly streamlining. And so, yeah, there are existing business license fees that are indicated in here that would be subject to that CPI unless otherwise approved by council. However, if we move forward with the business license item and it's determined that the change that we make, if council approves any changes to business license, that it would impact the fee, we'll need to go back and reevaluate that. And so upon reevaluating that, we can always lower our fees from what they are. But if you need to heighten them, we'd have to come back to you anyway to readjust them. And so I just wanted to point that out as well. So if any of these fees needed to be increased at any time, we can't as staff just go and increase the fee. A public hearing is required. We have to come right back to council. However, any actions that council take to lower those fees, that can be done without approvals. And so I just wanted to point that out as well. And so if you have any other questions or need additional feedback, we do have our consultant on the line remotely. We have David Schroeder with ClearSource, who obviously did the City of Gustine's fees as well. And if he has any,
That's great.
If he has any, or if you have any questions that maybe he needs to answer.
So questions up here?
Can I make just an observation or point something out?
Sure.
Just for you or the consultant. There are several, I know that if it says NA on the right-hand side, that there isn't any change, but I am seeing several that are increasing that say NA, so it probably should be CPI. And I'm looking at the culture and leisure on page 174 of our document here. So just to let you know that some of those are incorrect, some of those are they're increasing, but say that they're NA.
Let's take a look here. Okay, we're
Sure.
on page 174.
So, for example, aquatics, public swim down there, I mean, that's the first one that's any of those, actually.
Are you looking at number 7?
Number 7,
Okay.
sure. Goes up from 100 to 110, and on the right-hand side says NA, and that'll go on to the next page as well. So that can be an edit that can be made for whoever needs to do that.
Do you see that, David?
I do, and maybe it's a confusing note there that we can address or change. Typically, recreational fees are not subject to a cost of service type study. They're more driven by the market. So typically, a recreational department, or in this case, culture and leisure, will tell us, we feel this fee needs to move up by. Can you increase this fee by $5 or $10 or whatever that amount is? But typically, it's more of a market-driven fee than you would see if it was a service-based fee, like something like planning review or building inspection type thing, where you have, it's a service provided by a human rather than something in culture and leisure or recreational. So maybe it is confusing there. We can find a way to note that differently in the future, and differentiate it from CPI when it's not a CPI-based increase or change.
Sure, it's confusing to me as under yearly change, it says not applicable, so I would think there was no yearly change.
Yes.
But I do see that there is one, so I appreciate that. If you
Yep.
could change that, figure that out, that'd be great.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll work with the Omni to address that.
Any other questions from the council?
Any questions from the council here before we open it up?
I do. In comparison, when you were comparing the other two cities, I did notice on some of the items as you scrolled through them, about a 10% increase cost to our citizens versus theirs. I know we were looking at comparable cities. Would you say that in general, our fees are right in line with the other cities? Are we, what I kind of saw as we went through, roughly 10% higher? Are there some areas that are exorbitantly more or significantly less? A lot of questions, sorry.
Yeah, no. So I haven't actually done a fee comparison myself versus other cities for a few years. I think that David could probably do that because you're familiar with a lot more of the cities in this area and helped with those. Can you go ahead, David? Thank you.
Sure, if I can chime in. If it's helpful, when we do a comprehensive fee study, one of the things that we do is a regional fee comparison. So we'll look to your neighbors. Because this is an interim increase, we didn't do that at this point, but we would do it when we do a comprehensive fee study. One thing to keep in mind when we are doing fee comparisons across your neighbors or in the region is they may have certain fees that might be called a similar or the same name as the fee that you're doing, like plan review or building inspection, encroachment, something like that for engineering. But every city is different. The fee that they're describing may entail a slightly different set of activities, and therefore, they might spend a different amount of time. These service-based fees are based on time and the value of your staff. So how long does it take the staff out to do a certain service and how much is that time worth? So what we do is we first value your time, determine that cost, and that represents the legal ceiling or how much you can charge for a fee. Then we look to your neighbors in the region to see if you're generally in the ballpark of them. So if we saw something like a 10% difference, that may be perfectly acceptable and we would consider that in line. So it would have to be a specific fee. We would look at, what your neighbors are charging for that specific fee and then present that information to you. And it's really council that would determine if that seems like, a reasonable range for your fee to be set at.
So just to add to what David was saying, when we did that fee cost comparison back in 2018, a fee that stood out to past council was either our variance fee or our use permit fee. When reviewing how much that fee would cost for staff and the processes it would take, that fee was relatively high. And at that time, that council did not feel right about having a fee like that as high as it was. They wanted to provide businesses, because it was mostly businesses at that time that would have to apply for that type of use, and or residential families and such. And so they made that determination at that time to cut that fee in half. And so those fees were actually adopted at 50%, which I'm fairly confident that that's correct, 50%. It might have been a little bit more or less, but they essentially lowered that fee or adopted it on a different scale to keep it lower, to incentivize businesses, to not have them have to pay as much to go through that process. Even though it was costing the city much, that was something that past council felt would benefit the community as a whole, getting businesses in faster, having them pay less for that process in order to do so. And so that's an example of what the council can do when they're looking at fee cost comparison. Yep. Here it costs 100%. You could go and say, I'm not comfortable charging the 100%. Let's do it at 70. What does 70 look like? Well, this is 70. Okay, well, we want to adopt this fee at 70. And so that's what was done in 2018 with that comprehensive study.
City Attorney? you
Yeah, I
have
just
something?
want to add, legally speaking, though, and David, maybe not put it as crassly as this, a fee comparison study is legally almost irrelevant. The cost of service is what is all that matters. So if our adjacent city is charging $1,000 for something, but it's only costing us $100 worth of staff time and services to it, that's all we can charge. So what's really the most important thing is what is the actual cost of service to provide and for those fees? And that's going to be the most dispositive. Now, it's not complete.
If that was the case, then how was the example that?
Well, we can always do less then. You can always do less.
Okay.
Right? You could say it costs us $500, but we're going to only charge $250. You could always do that. You just can't do more because of Prop 218, Prop 26, that basically said you can't use fees as workarounds to Prop 13, which said you have to limit tax revenue. Well, it's all started from the property tax and Melrose Ruse, right? And then cities were coming up with new ways to raise taxes indirectly and then Prop 218, 26 came online and said your fees have to be based on the reasonable relationship of the cost of service. Now, that's not a scientific study, but I will say this. In 2024, there's a ballot measure that's in the works called the Taxpayer Protection Act that's going to raise the standard from a reasonable relationship to clear and convincing evidence. And so it's going to make the burden on the cities to prove the cost of service a lot harder, even for over-the-counter fees. So I hate to say this, but like what we have to do for Prop 218 for water rate and sewer rate studies, those cost of service, level of service studies, you're almost going to have to do something like that for the future for fees too. And what won't fly then for sure is, well, the city across the street does it this way. That's not going to work. The only ones that are really going to benefit from this are, no offense, but consultants like David's company, because it's going to give them a lot more work to do, for this, and then it's going to cause a lot more challenges to cities for these fees. So it's a long way, and that, by the way, that was tongue in cheek, David. You do a great job.
No worries.
But my point is the long story short of this is this. The fees that we charge have to be based on our cost of service. That's going to be the most important. That's the guiding light. Fee studies are helpful sometimes as evidence of what is a reasonable cost in the area, but it's not dispositive.
Councilman Sherman, you have a question?
Actually, I want to make sure that Councilman Engel's concerns are addressed first.
I just had a follow-up for the question that you just answered. So if we do determine that we want to lower a fee, what would that actual process look like? Does it require consensus? Does it require a suggestion from the public? Does it require a majority vote from the council? How does that process come about? So if we discover a fee on there that we see that we believe is too high, how do we correctly go about addressing that?
Yeah, so that you're adopting the fee schedule tonight, or the action tonight is to adopt a resolution approving the fee schedule. If you want to change it any time, the staff will come back with a new resolution amending the fee schedule.
Okay. So it would have to make it onto the agenda,
Yeah.
which would require consensus, and then it would require a vote?
It would require either staff can bring it if they feel that it's important, or two council members. It doesn't require consensus of the council for a future agenda. So just two council members would have to say.
To make it onto the agenda?
To make it on the agenda.
It would require a vote in order to pass
Correct.
the resolution?
Correct.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure I understood the process. Thank you.
Any other questions or concerns here before we go to the public? Yep, go ahead.
So, Mr. Mayor, I actually have done some research. And I have the same document from the city of Augustine. I also pulled the city of Oakdale. City of Oakdale has 7 pages worth of fees. Ours is 34. Oakdale's a much bigger city. In addition to that, there are fees that are included in here. I understand it's to help staff. And to try to keep this as politically correct as possible, I would agree that there are fees in here that we are overcharging our residents. And I feel that we need to take a deeper dive into some of these and really look at them wholeheartedly. I know this is an interim year, but we are a new council, and we have that responsibility to ourselves and to our residents. I'll give you, for example, the page that's in front of us, the community center. Right now, if you are a resident within the city limits and in the 95320 zip code, you can rent the community center for $850, correct? Everybody sees $850? Well, in the city of...
Line 2A,
Right.
Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
When the city of Gustine, on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, if you're a Gustine resident, you can rent it for $575. If, then you go down a little bit further, we identify for-profit users, $18.50 for Friday, Saturday, Sunday use. City of Gustine, $675. Staff, I can appreciate all the hard work that went into this previously by previous councils, but I feel that we need to take a much serious, deeper dive and go and look at this fee schedule and compare it to the city of Gustine, other cities in our area, and really look at it wholeheartedly. Just my opinion, but I think the community center should be packed 6 and 7 days a week. It's our community center, for crying out loud. There should be people banging on the doors wanting to reserve that place. And I know for a fact that people aren't, because they can't afford $850 plus a cleaning deposit in order to rent it. It's a community center. It's our community center. And so, I mean, that was one example.
That example, did you happen to catch the square footage and facility benefits they offer in Gustine compared to ours? Is ours bigger than theirs, square footage, as far as an analysis? Fee to fee, it's not a fair comparison at all. Just say they're cheaper than us if their facility is half the size of ours.
I honestly don't know.
And we can hold weddings that are twice the size, and therefore our costs can be higher and in line with other facilities in the area for set events. So I'm not sure we really need to worry about driving down the rabbit hole of worrying about individual cost lines at the current moment. We're doing a CPI increase for the current schedule, and we already have on the line in the upcoming future here of doing a full study increase. So I don't think we need to get in the weeds at the current moment on little costs here and there for comparison to other cities at the current moment myself. We're just looking for a nominal CPI increase, keep the ball rolling as our costs have increased over the last time we've done this.
So we're just supposed to review the CPI index and not take a deep dive into the fees?
We mentioned we were gonna go into a fee schedule review. Did I not hear that?
Those are
10 minutes ago?
Those are typically done about every 5 years.
And we're due for one of those studies.
So we are due. We're going to shoot for that to be done this year. However, it might be done in the following year. It just depends what other things we have going on, which I know we have a lot of other bigger projects, rate studies and such that will need to be updated as well. And so we have to prioritize those in accordance with our projects that we have moving forward. I just wanted to point out that, like Frank had mentioned, or Attorney Splendorio mentioned, council can make those changes. You just have to agree upon it. And so you just have to let us know what you'd like to change, and we can put that on a future agenda and or address it tonight if needed, and if he agrees to that. Another item that comes into play that I've seen in the past having to do with community centers is age. A lot of the community centers in other communities are much older than ours, so the fees are cheaper because everything is older. They have an older facility. It's not as nice looking. For me personally, working in other cities and other government agencies that have community centers, ours is the nicest one I've seen. I don't go to a lot of community centers, but compared to neighboring cities, ours is newer, up to date, kept up nicely, and so that would probably play a large factor in there. We have nicer tables, nicer chairs, a full kitchen facility, like the amenities, as you mentioned, are good. The Oakdale one's very nice too. So I mean, it just depends. That's the only one that I've been to that I've noticed is very nice compared to ours. So,
And,
that out there.
and honestly, I didn't do a complete deep dive on every single page
Yeah.
of our fees. I mean, I can't speak to community development fees, and sure as heck don't want to talk about police fees, but, I mean, there are certain things that I think that we should really take a look at, if the rest of the council agrees.
I think, Councilman Stroman, to piggyback off what Dave's saying, I think if you do your own, due diligence or deep dive like you're talking about, and you discover that when we're looking at apples to apples, and you find that one apple is clearly way more expensive, but we're comparing, like things together, then I think you bring it back to the council, and it's, reviewed, I think is what he's getting at. Otherwise, if it's, it's hard to compare one thing to another if you don't know all the parameters.
With all due respect, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, isn't that why we have the consultant?
That's why they're talking about doing the review, I believe is what's going on. CPI change, like Dave said, Mr. Mayor said, and they're actively going back through a review to make sure that these fees are fair and in line with what they should be, is my understanding.
If the consultant, so let's talk about the ones that are on the screen. The example I used for community center. So I guess, and I can certainly do my deeper dive if I need to, and go try to look at the community center of Gustine. My point is, there are huge disparities between the city of Gustine and the city of Escalon, and our cities are about the same size. Now granted, I've never been to the city of Gustine Community Center. Maybe it's very small compared to ours, but I will definitely do that research and come back.
I guess what I'm getting at is I think that's what the whole point of the consultant is to do that. But if you discover that there's some sort of a mistake, then by all means, the citizens would want to know that.
I think we talked about the process as to how we would address that. Mr. Mayor, can I make a motion? Do we still have some?
We need to open it up.
I have
It's a public hearing, so.
Question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so we are talking, or, we've been using the community center as an example, and you've mentioned that there's amenities like the full kitchen and whatnot. But is there another fee schedule for someone who just wants to have a meeting without use of the kitchen, like a secondary, if you're just using it as a meeting spot for an hour or 2 hours and you're not using those amenities, or you wouldn't require those types of cleanups or that kind of insurance or whatever you would for use of the kitchen, would that be another fee that we would, is that something someone was able to negotiate, or would we need to put that on the fee schedule so that somebody could just hold a meeting at the community center without use of the kitchen for a discounted fee?
We do have a half-day setup, and so it looks like we do half-days and then full days, and it's event influence. So if you look at numbers, or each of the numbers, item C has half-day setup, and then
And so that would
for each
be
of them,
Sans Kitchen.
those are the only ones, right? Oh, is that for decoration? Okay, so this is from 2 to 9 prior days, so that's decoration. So where does it have, do we have a half-day fee?
There is none.
Okay, we do not have an actual half-day fee.
That's something we could consider is kind of for the different uses that our community and our citizens might want to use it for. It's not necessarily always for a wedding or a party or a, crab feed. And sometimes you do want to have a community meeting or meetings with, just a community meeting for our citizens to be able to use.
That could be something that we can definitely look into and add to the schedule, or it's something we can put on the radar for the next time we do our comprehensive study on all of the fees, and add that in there as an option that the council wants to be given a fee on, to get an idea of how much that would be. And so if you were able to.
May I chime in?
Oh, go ahead. Sorry, David.
No worries. So when we get to doing the comprehensive fee study, we'll meet with departments. In this case, would be recreation, and typically talk with staff there and director level. When it comes to something like facility use and including or excluding something, an amenity like a kitchen, it's typically determined by that department and that staff as to services that they offer. So we would work with the community development department, or I'm sorry, the community services department or recreational department to see if that's a service that they offer. I'm not sure if they, rent out the space without, excluding certain amenities or including all amenities or anything like that. But typically that's something that the department itself will determine. This is a service that we're going to offer. We'll work with them to present an appropriate level of fee. They'll recommend that fee, and at that point, council would review and either approve, amend, or say, no, we don't want to do that.
That would happen with the full study, right?
Well, it can happen in an interim period too, but when we get to that point, it would be an item that would be studied at that time, whether it's done. Fees don't all have to be studied together. They can be done periodically at different times. Having a consolidated fee schedule and doing a comprehensive study it's a tool that the city can use to increase its efficiency in managing the schedule. But to create a service, or when you're creating a brand new fee, that fee needs to be studied so you can determine, an appropriate amount to charge. You don't want to exceed your cost of service. You want to charge, the legal mandate for fee setting is estimated reasonable cost. So we work with the city staff to determine that estimated reasonable cost. So at this time, I'm not sure if the city offers that service. If it does, it's not reflected in the schedule. But if it's something the council is interested in, we can work with city staff to address that and see if it's something we want to add at the next interval or at the next study.
Or at the next study.
Awesome. I do know that if it's not on the fee schedule, staff and I've tried to reserve a softball field for 1 hour, and I was told I cannot do that. It's not on the fee schedule. You must reserve it for 3 hours minimum. So I do know that it's hard to go off of anything that's on the fee schedule. So I do know that that's at least how we've been running it in the past.
Right, at this point, can we open up the public hearing then? Let's go ahead and open up the public hearing. It's, whatever time that is, 8:39. So if there's somebody in the public who'd like to come up and talk about this, please come up.
Hi, I'll try to make it quick. I know time's fleeting here. A little history on the community center. You guys weren't around when there was the ups and downs in the economy and these fee reviews were taking place before prior city councils. The actual cost of that, this is going back a decade and a half, was over $1,000, they figure, per event. The city council decided, well, it was a downturn in the economy. They didn't want to charge that. They want to encourage the use. They brought it down to what you're seeing now. Just a little history for you. So when you're looking at reducing fees on a market-based service that we have here, look at the time of the year, the economy that you're in, what's the depreciation, all of those little factors there, and don't go by gut. Go by a little bit of facts. That was just a quickie there. The connection fees are not part of this because they aren't being increased?
Correct. That was a part of our master fee schedule. And I feel like that when we brought it all together, because we consolidated it as a staff so that we had all of our fees together, that might have given the impression that those were being increased. So this round, we pulled those out to make it clear that those fees are not a part of this user and regulatory fee.
And I apologize for addressing staff, but I don't know if you guys knew that. Fees are the lifeblood of the city. Taxes, assessments, what have you, we're not legally able to charge more than it costs us. I think Orange County was the culprit, a few decades ago that got sued by the state of California for just charging outrageous fees for building permits and what have you, and they couldn't justify it because staff times, equipment, whatever was used to calibrate the cost of actually putting one of those through was just outrageous. That's why you need a fee study. When you dig deep, that's what determines it. I don't like escalators on fees because unless you can show that your costs have risen, those things keep going up. And so 5 years later, when you have a fee study, they said, well, no, this fee's out of line. It only costs you this. You're now charging that. Something to consider for that. And it's coming up a little bit later here, when you decide to cut a fee, that is making the taxpayer pay for a developer, for example, not paying that extra portion of a connection. So maybe when you're looking at trying to bring in businesses and make things look more attractive, you look at a deferral of some costs over time to, let them make up their money or what have you. So just something to be thinking about when you go to the next item. Thank you.
Anybody else in the public out here today in the audience would like to speak on this topic? Anybody online that would like to speak to this topic? Hearing none, we'll go ahead and close the public hearing on item number 6. Bring it back to council for further discussion and motions. Concerns, comments, questions at this point?
So realistically, when would we do that deep dive comprehensive study? Either later this year or next year?
If council directs us to get it done this fiscal year, we'll get it done this fiscal year. Currently, we have other items that we're working on, but we are due for that, and so it's definitely on the radar of something that needs to be done. And so we typically try to get to them as quickly as we can. But if council wants it done, and can agree that you want it done by a certain date, we'll go ahead and move on it now.
Does one of those typically cost?
Ooh. David, do you feel comfortable giving me an estimate on a fee study?
That's okay.
Normally Terry Madsen, my associate, will
But I just-
handle the pricing. Off the top of my head, I would say it's in the 35,000 range or something like that for a full comprehensive fee study for looking at all departments. Typically, they take anywhere from 3 to 6 months to complete. We shoot for 90 days from start to finish. Sometimes they can take a little bit longer, but they're very, very difficult, time-intensive projects to complete.
Thank you.
Because of the cost, we would put it out for an RFP.
Don't hold me to that amount. That's just off the top of my head, and typically I'm more, on the analysis side of things with regard to the company and the service we provide, but I think it's somewhere in that range.
No, I appreciate it.
And so we would put out an RFP for something like that as well, and so it would just be dependent on which companies submit, and then who's recommended to move forward. It would come back to council for approval.
Is that someone we can put on a timeline before, say, the next CPI increase potential would come back to council in another 12 months? That we can coincide that so that we don't have to deal with CPI with the other thing pending? I don't have to do this twice in a year.
So once you start a new fee study, it would be a year from whenever that fee study is approved. So if we were able to move it forward, and it doesn't have to be done in June, or July 1st, that's typically when we've done it, and then after that, we've kind of had, where it's delayed, obviously, we're looking at this one not being effective until November. It just depends on when things are addressed. But essentially, if you're having that fee schedule and it's due, and it begins, calendar years, usually we look at July 1st, then we would come back to you for the CPI adjustment, hopefully by that July 1st. However, sometimes it falls behind, but it's supposed to be annually after that.
So if we did approve this, we are able to bring back particular fees for adjustment at any time, is that correct?
Correct. Yeah. It just, if you're increasing fees, a public hearing has to be scheduled in advance.
If you're decreasing, it does not.
It does not. No public hearing is required.
I'd make a motion to adopt the resolution under number 6, XX-23, revising the schedule of user and regulatory fees for various city services.
We have a motion on the table. Do we have a second?
like to second it, but I wanted to add something to that. Do I have to see?
Before we add a second, well, yeah, we can ask Vice Mayor what amendment you'd like to add, and if you would like to add that to his motion.
That would just be to have that study performed in the 24-25 fiscal year. And that would give us to 25-26 to have those fees in effect.
Yeah, I can get on board with that, yeah.
We got that amendment to that motion then, city staff on that?
It'll be to go ahead and approve the adjustment in the 23-24 fiscal year for CPI 5.6%, and then to agendize or move on the new study for fee services in the 24-25 fiscal year to become effective 25-26. Okay.
What's our reasoning on that? I'm sorry. Just to give us some time?
Well, yes, to budget for it, because we're working on 23-24 budget now, and it's not in there. So we need time to put that into the budget. That gives us 1 year to work on that, to get it into the budget. It takes 1 year from the time that's complete for it to become effective. So the 24-25 would when it would be budgeted for and incurred, and effective 25-26 fiscal year.
Okay. And does this must be done every 5 years, or that's just a usual, what we usually do every 5 years?
Practice.
Okay.
It's to try to, in efforts to stay current.
The last one was 2018, correct?
We're in that wheelhouse then. Right, so then we have a motion and a second, is that correct? So at this point, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Nay.
Our motion carries 3-2. Moving on to our next item, administrative matters, number 7, appoint, reappoint, or provide direction on the Commission on Aging for our Escalon representative seat. Staff.
Okay. Oh, so this item we actually don't have a item for. I did hand out a fact sheet on there. It did come to staff's attention that the Commission on Aging seat that we have as an Escalon representative for San Joaquin County Commission on Aging will be expiring on August 17th. And so in efforts to address the expiration, this item's been agendized, and I've tried to agendize it for any potential action. This is not a city committee, and so it is not subject to the policies that have been adopted by these councils. I can't recall if it was past council or present council where we established a vacancy process, how to handle vacancies for city council and commissions. This is not our commission, this is a commission of San Joaquin County, which they've asked Escalon to provide a representative for. And so this is an item where, at council's discretion, can direct staff to address it in any way that you choose. A reappointment can be done, options, a reappointment here tonight, you can put it out for advertisement, just let staff know exactly how you'd like to do it, and/or whatever the council decides as a group. So.
Mr. Let's make a comment?
Yes, please.
I think in staying transparent with the way we were doing things up till now, even though it's not exactly like the Planning Commission stuff, I think it would be wisest to put it out and let anyone who wants to come forward, and then go from there. I think that would, I think that would be the only fair way to do it, is my opinion on that.
Anybody else have comments or concerns or questions?
I would agree, just because it's not part of a city commission, we are still looking at it at city council from a similar lens. I do believe it should be put out publicly so that the public has the ability to respond, and if there are interested parties, that they could step forward and potentially apply for the position. So I'm in agreement with Andy.
I would agree with the idea of a process of some sort, very similar. I don't know if it needs to be quite as elongated as our other process, but something very similar where if someone's interested, because I'm not sure everybody knows this might be an available position that they could have, if they were interested in that, I think we should hear from anybody who might be interested in that and then make a decision based on that.
then how would they, so someone would apply, then how would we vet them? Similar to like we did with the planning commission?
I would think so.
Yeah, I think so.
Individually read their application and ask questions if they were interested when they came up the podium, just like we did with the commission. And vote on an applicant that we think is the best suited for that position. I think that'd be the most transparent for our citizens if somebody was interested in it, so.
How was it done previously when Ms. Shaddix was appointed?
My recollection has been that we haven't typically put it out unless we're unable to find somebody, and so it's been people that show interest at the meeting that it's brought up at. I cannot recall specifically, this was during, when it was reappointed 2020. I can't recall how that came about. I don't even know if we were meeting in person then, to be honest. But it's just one of those things where these types of seats don't typically generate a lot of activity. However, it was also that way with planning commission and council at one point in time, and obviously those dynamics changed this last round. So I don't know if we're gonna get applicants, and it could be possibly we don't receive any, you know, yeah.
And that may be the same, but it seems there's been a big push in the last couple of years where the citizens were wanting more transparency and more, you know, understanding of when seats were coming available and all that kind of stuff. So I think to stay consistent, I think that's what we need to do. And that's my opinion on it.
So if that's council's direction, how many days would you want us to put it out for? Our next meeting is the 21st, and so I would ask that you at least give us till end of day Wednesday to get it up and posted, because I would need staff to update our applications specific to this. We can get it advertised on our website. We could put an advertisement in the newspaper by Wednesday, and we can also have it posted on our Facebook. Another option that we've done is put some type of flyer that's posted on Facebook up at the counter for advertisement as well. And so we can handle it then. Is it something that you would want me to go ahead and put back on the agenda for the 21st, or do you think that you would like more time and put it back on the agenda for the 5th of September, or do you want even more time? Do you want full 30 days, or?
Mr. Mayor, what do you think?
Is appropriate?
My first gut thought is get the applications over the next 2-3 weeks, and we bring it in September and do the same process we did. And those that do apply and would like to participate in the process would show up on the 5th, and we would have the applications and resources that were provided to us to review prior to that meeting. Then we can ask some questions, and we can make the best informed decision at that point that we feel is right for the city at that point. That's my thought anyways.
So you're thinking the first meeting in September?
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor, Ms. Shaddix would like to.
Yeah, we were gonna
talk about this.
And that would actually work pretty well on the dates, because the meeting dates of that group, their meetings take place on the first Monday of the month, unless it's a holiday, which the meeting takes place the following Monday. And so typically, if they were like us, they'd move it to the Tuesday, which would be the night of our meeting. However, their meeting that would have been scheduled on Labor Day will get moved to the following week. So that works with the schedule for the commission as well.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes, Ms. Shaddix.
I'd like to address this. For one, usually the process that you're following is recommended when the position is vacant. I have not been asked whether I would continue to do the job that I'm now serving. It would be a big disruption for me to have to drop out at this point because of the projects that I had committed to for Escalon and for the county. When I became the commissioner, it was because there had been a vacancy for a long time. And the mayor and Mayor Pro Tem at that time asked me if I would fill the position, and I said yes. So I'm not real happy about putting this out to bid, because then I have to go back and stop all projects immediately, because now you're going to go through a new process that I wasn't aware of, nor was I asked whether I would continue in the current position, of which I would have said, yes, I would like to serve for the next term, and during that term, then begin to try to find somebody to transition to after the 3-year period. So I would ask that you allow me to continue for the 3 years, and if there is no one that comes forward the next time, that you follow the process of going out to the community, which you usually do in a vacancy.
We also do it with end of terms with the planning commission. We did that as their terms expired. We did the same exact process, so it's nothing that we're avoiding as far as those terms expired and we had that process. This term at this point is expired. And I'm not saying that you're not doing a great job and we don't want you back. We're trying to do this transparently with the other community members that may be interested in that and have the same opportunity that you do to serve on that. There may be other people, there may not be, but we have to have that same transparency and opportunity and not just appoint somebody because they have been doing the job. That'd be the same, why do we have a vote then? Because we're doing the job and I don't want to give it up. Why would I, that's not the same. So I think that, in my opinion, you have very good credentials and arguments as to why you should continue, and that would be strongly supported, I think, if you applied when we had this process to go through. You're actively involved in it, you have background, you have knowledge. So it's not like you're coming in blind like somebody else who may apply, but nonetheless, the process needs to process, in my opinion.
I understand that, but I also understand that I was given 2 days' notice that this, and then all of a sudden tonight you're coming up with this, and I have committed to some projects in the county, and I'm in the middle of working on them, and tomorrow I will have to notify them that I am through until...
Why would you notify them that you're done? Currently, you have the position, and we've not removed you from said position.
Because
Why would you remove yourself?
Because you're going out to the public. Do I stay in the position until you decide?
Yeah, you should stay in it and own it. And if your name is in the, I'm assuming you're going to apply for this position because you're passionate about this. And you're still doing, there's no reason to call somebody up and cancel and quit. We're not trying to kick you out, and we're trying to be transparent for open positions that are available to all citizens of this town, just like we do planning commission.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, so do you need a motion on this or just a consensus on what we would like to do?
So the consensus would be for staff to get everything out by close of business day on Wednesday, and we'll have it advertised in the newspaper, Facebook page, and up on our website. We'll also include some flyers up at the front counter on how to apply, and then the appointment or interviews. In the past, it's been interviews. We would schedule them for that Tuesday meeting.
On the 5th.
On the 5th.
What kind of deadline do we want to do for when the applications process would close? How many, like the 25th, which is 2.5 weeks almost? That gives a week for you to collect them all and get them out to us. We have a few days to review.
That seems reasonable to me.
Yeah, it would have to be on the agenda, right, and posted by the...
Agenda would go out on the 31st or 1st probably. But we would have it closed by the 25th, so the staff has time to put it together on the agenda for that week of the 28th.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And then schedule interviews.
Interviews on the 5th. is my
Mr. Mayor?
thought. Yes.
May I ask a question?
Yes.
So, staff, when are the next round of planning commission appointments open? And yes, there's relevance to this question.
Isn't it every 2 years? There's a 4-year window, but it's staggered every 2.
3 and a 2. 3.
Similar to the council?
Yeah.
In
I'd
some
have to
form?
double check. I don't know
I don't know
offhand.
what the dates are, but
Yeah, I don't know the expiration dates.
isn't it the same process of some sort, 3 and 2? Every 2 years, I
staggered.
think?
I
It's
guess.
staggered, yeah.
And the new process adopted by council is even the current, what the current planning commissioners have to, well, they have to reapply, but is the expectation that they will come before council as well and be interviewed?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, the new policy requires everybody to submit an application that council adopted. Everybody submits an application, everybody gets an interview by the council, and then you do nomination periods and then make an appointment. That all comes to the council in steps, and so the council agrees, when to interview, or you can agree, if there's only one applicant, that you don't need to do the interview, you would appoint. It just depends on the circumstances.
Correct.
Yeah.
I think it's important to note that, Ms. Shaddix has poured her heart and soul into this Commission on Aging for the last, I don't know how many years. And while this process, and it definitely encourages transparency, I can understand the position that Ms. Shaddix is in is because she just found out 2 days ago that, hey, surprise, surprise, we're going to re-advertise your position. And the relationships that she has built with the other commissioners on aging, all that may be for naught. And so that's my concern.
Any other questions or concerns?
I just want to say this doesn't speak to the great job that Ms. Shattuck's been doing. I do feel like maybe in the past we weren't doing it though as transparently as we should have been doing it, and we're correcting how we were going about it in the past. And I just want to put that out there, that's part of what we're trying to do here, is be as transparent as possible and make the process open to the community as much as possible. And so as our commissions do reapply, I don't know, but I know at REC we reapply whenever our terms are up, and it's just out there. So, but all of that past experience that you have on every commission is also considered in that application process. So I encourage anybody that wants to apply and that has the experience that Ann has. So.
Sounds like you have direction then? You have direction for that schedule then?
We'll get it up by 5 p.m. Wednesday and do all the advertising and schedule interviews for the first meeting in September, which is on Tuesdays.
Close the application process on the end of the day to 25th.
Okay.
So that gives you the week of the 28th to work it into the agenda as you work that through.
Thank you for that reminder. Okay.
All right, moving on to number 8, consider request for reduced fees for Cornerstone Construction for a proposed senior housing project referred to as Countrywood Estates.
Okay, good evening, Mayor, Council. Again, Jalen French. As was read, again, the item before you is consideration of a fee reduction request from Cornerstone Construction for a proposed senior residential development referred to as Countrywood Estates, to be located south of Countrywood Road, east of McHenry, adjacent to the proposed McDonald's, as is shown on the screen. The residential project is a proposed 18-unit, age-restricted, age 55 and older residential development, with 17 of those units being 1 bedroom, 1 bath, 728 square feet, and 1 studio apartment, 637 square feet, in 4 buildings. So this is a multifamily apartment development. Multifamily housing is permitted use in the commercial zone with the approval of a planned development application. The applicant has expressed that before proceeding with a development application, they would like to determine project viability, and one of the things they will use that, determine it through is the fees. So on June 21st of this year, Mr. Jeff Sale submitted an agenda item and request form to the council to request this fee reduction, and that is the item before you tonight. So with that, Cornerstone Construction is requesting the reduction of 3 total fees, 1 development impact fee and 2 service connection fees, as well as the waiving of the requirement to perform a traffic study with the thought that a traffic study was recently prepared for the McDonald's development. So in this request, Cornerstone is making the argument that the age-restricted occupants of the development would have a lesser impact on the specific areas in which the fees are requested to be reduced. In this case, parks and recreation facilities and services programs, as well as water and sewer. So a lesser impact than a typical multifamily development. Specifically, they're requesting a 100% reduction in the parks and recreation fee from $12,226 per unit to zero, and are requesting a 50% reduction to the water and sewer connection fees. So for sewer, this would equate to a reduction from $5,878 per unit to $2,939 per unit. And the water fee would be based on the line size of the system, which would be determined after the project has been designed. So California Government Code does allow local governments to exempt reduced fees for affordable or senior housing, though usually through when codified by ordinance. And then just specific on the connection fee versus development impact fees. Connection fees are one-time fees assessed on new connections for water or sewer in this case. They are used for the act to physically connect to the city system, as well as for the equipment, materials, and labors used to connect. Any reduction would be subsidized by the city's general fund. A development impact fee, again, in this case, parks and recreation fee, is a charge in connection with the development to defray the impact that new development has on the existing facilities or services. So in this case, while numbers were provided specifically to give you a frame of reference, if the council chooses to approve a reduction, it would be based on the percentage that the council selected, and those fees would be calculated at the time of building permit. So it's not necessarily the number stated, it'd be the percentage and then calculated when the building permit was pulled, whenever that may be. So with that, staff is happy to answer any questions that the council may have.
Thank you. I'd like to hear from the folks with the project to speak on that topic possibly and explain the reason for the request.
Good evening, council. My name is Jeff Sales, and I'm the applicant and contractor and property manager for this project. And I just finished up a similar project in Modesto, and I'm hoping to do the same here. But I'm looking for help on the fees because they are approximately twice what they are with what I just built in Modesto. And I'm not looking for a subsidy, at least in my view, because when a use isn't incurred, if my residents or population would be well beyond their child rearing years, it would not have kids participating in, the rec leagues, nor the parks and things like that. And as far as the water and sewer fees, it's simply they don't use nearly as much as a typical multifamily house would be. And I'd like to also make one thing clear as far as this reduction of fees isn't a gift to a developer per se, because whatever fees are incurred, they have to be passed down. And so it's the more fees that you charge me effectively, the more I have to charge the residents, and it's not like it's me running away with the money, because it's not the case. So but anyways, I'm happy to answer any questions.
So you're anticipating of having a 55 and older requirement to the property?
Correct.
Are you expecting to make that low-income housing for seniors, or is this market rate rental? It's an apartment cost. I'm assuming you're not selling these units?
Correct.
Okay, so it's an apartment situation where you're renting to folks and you're looking to do market rate?
Correct.
Questions also? Let's open up for the rest of the council here for council questions. Go ahead.
I had one question. Kurt had brought it up earlier, the idea of deferred fees. Would you be open to that idea as far as, structuring some schedule that would work with you?
I'm not familiar with that type of an arrangement. It's not what I would prefer. I'm not sure how that would really work. I mean, are you saying just after so many number of years to repay that fee, is that?
Yeah, instead of paying it all up front, you're paying it over a agreed period of time.
I would like to. I don't know that the project would pencil out, just pushing it down the road. I mean, I'm not saying a hard no, but I would say that's not what I would prefer.
My concern would be it's a market rate situation. You set the rates. Whether we choose to give you a break on fees or not doesn't necessarily change. Current market rate is X amount for a facility like this.
Correct.
Whether we gave you a break on fees or not, you can still adjust rates whether we do or don't. So I don't see that whether we do this or not, it's going to help our community necessarily by giving you the benefit of a fairly large sum of money that could go to our town, and you're still going to charge what you want to charge. Whether we charge you or not, how are you going to justify and tell us that you're going to lower the rent because we don't charge you these fees versus what you would charge if we charge those fees? So where does that benefit hit those 18 residents that may rent from your facility?
Right. And it's not a matter of so much of me wanting to charge more and just increasing it. It's based on kind of the market and what it will bear. But it really would be not so much of how much I can lower the rent. It would just be if with this fee structure, it doesn't make financial sense to move forward with this project. So it's more of, you want a project or no project.
May I?
Yeah, please.
Just wanted to address the rationale on what you had said about parks and recreation and being above the age. Just this senior facility is about 2 blocks away from a very nice park. And at 55 and older, a lot of people do utilize our parks as well. It is for our parks facilities as well as recreation. And in our recreation programs, we do include adult softball. We have dog training in the park if you wanted to take your dog and get a dog trained. We also have all ages karate that we have through our recreation programs. And then there has been several other things that we're trying to develop and other proposed programs. They are all, they're all ages and they are for everybody. So
as well as our downtown part for farmers market and other things
and our
too.
downtown park, which, yeah, the dog training's there, but we have all of the parks and those types of things that we use those for. And then, like I said, other projects that have been proposed and worked on for all ages, not just youth. So just putting that out there to address that rationale as well.
The typical resident that we have is late 60s, early 70s, so it's not even, I know the 55 and over seems maybe not where they could participate in some of those activities, but none of my current residents, I would say, that are 70 would be doing karate, which.
Mr. Mayor, may I ask a question?
Please.
So obviously, we can't get into the business specifics, but if we're looking at 18 units and market rate, what's about $1,800 a month to rent?
No, I'm targeting more at 1,600.
Okay. So 18 units, 1,600, it's 28,800. So what you're asking for, basically what we're saying is that if we don't do this reduction in fees, doesn't 1 month's rent cover those fees?
No.
Hey, so.
At the lowest connection, if you're connecting a really small line, I did some quick math, it's gonna take 12 years to pay back what he's asking us to reduce. You got $220,000 of Parks and Rec, almost $53,000 on the sewer connection. If you look at the lowest scale, the 5/8 to 3/4 line connection, that's almost $100,000 all the way up to the 6-inch, what I don't think would be required, but that's $4.6 million, and you total it up to 18 units.
Okay, that's what I'm trying to figure out, because if you look at the cover letter,
If that's
so is it
per unit.
12,226 per each of the 18 units?
Correct.
Okay, I looked at it as the buildings as a whole.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, well, hey, thanks for trying to bring a project to Escalon, right? This is something we've been talking about for a while. We need senior housing, we need somebody to come in and develop. It sounds like this is publicly funded. Can I ask you the funding mechanism?
It's
This
not,
project?
it's not public.
Pardon?
It's private.
It's private. I'm sorry, that's what I meant. Which is really what we've been looking for. We've had a lot of government inquiries to projects which restrict our residents to be able to utilize such a facility. I'm happy to see somebody trying to build here. So thanks, and thanks for taking the appropriate avenue to come ask, right? The answer is always no, unless you ask. I do believe that you're asking for a lot, but from my seat, I would definitely be willing to work on some form of fee reduction in order to try and push that process through. And it's not penciled out, but just doing some quick math sat well with me, and I'm just gonna throw it out there. People can like it or not. I think an overall 20% reduction in all of those fees is reasonable from where I sit to try and get a project to move here in town. So not the 100% on the Parks and Rec, it'd be 20% sewer connection, 20%. The water connection also at 20%. Is, from your company's standpoint, I mean, are you guys willing to negotiate? Are you willing to look at some ideas and options? Or are you saying this is what I need to do in order to build here? If I can't get this, I can't build?
No, I'm definitely not saying that. I'm happy to work with you and negotiate.
Yeah, I'm definitely on board with seeing where the negotiation would go, because I think it's obviously something we really need.
I'm willing to entertain that thought as well. We do need smaller units in Escalon. It isn't it's necessary, and if we can get them through senior housing, that's preferable. And so I appreciate you coming to council to ask, and I definitely would love to kind of try and negotiate something to make it work. But yeah, you are asking for a lot today, but we can kind of see where that goes and takes us.
How did you come up with the 55 and older? I mean, would you consider 62 and older?
Yeah, that's, absolutely. I think that's generally the age of the population. So I have this project we just finished in Modesto and a few others locally are 55 and over, but the far majority are 62 and over. Like,
Couple clarifications. 55 and over, because state law, age restricted is allowed for 55 and over. So that's why typically the 55 and over is used, because there's state law that talks about it's not discriminatory to have housing for age restricted 55 and over. The other option, if there is an appetite for the council to negotiate, is other cities enter, instead of fee reductions, they do fee deferrals. So in other words, the developer in often cases is trying not to have to like they're trying to save on their capital costs up front, so they can get the project going and then start giving revenue streams, and then at that point they can start to pay the cities back. So some cities have seen that fee deferral programs are a way for the city to still capture all of its revenue, or I shouldn't say revenue, its costs, but the developer doesn't have to bear that at the very beginning. So you can also explore a fee deferral program as well.
Mr. Mayor, can I say something? Is this something where potentially staff could sit down with you figure out a potential negotiation and then bring it back to us?
Yes, that's good for me.
And what do you feel with something like that?
Direct you to
Come back with something to think about. I'd like to hear from the rest of the community out here as well, if they've got thoughts and concerns and questions as well, before we get too much deeper into this.
Just
With some questions, yeah. Is there anybody else out in the audience here that has some questions for this gentleman or for the council here? Yes.
I'd like to say something for you. I'm 78 years old, and I go to a Silver Sneakers program 4 times a week. I do 15 minutes of aerobic, 15 minutes of weight, and 15 minutes of bands. So, let me tell you, age has nothing to do with it. If you want to do
Commendable.
it, you get out there and do it. I could walk 2 miles after that.
Good job, Betty.
I'll start off on that same thing also. Because at 55, I was still out there with a lot of my friends and a lot of the other people my age playing softball. So the age has nothing to do with it. And hopefully rec will come up with a shuffleboard, bocce ball, or something else like that for us older people.
Pickleball?
One thing.
Pickleball.
But as far as the age limit of 55, I know the state says, well, that's a senior. That's prime earning years. I mean, that's when you got it made in whatever profession, as much as you're going to have it made, and you're making the most money. You see, if you want a senior development, go 65. Sean, 62 is getting close, but 65 should be that's a senior. Gets older as I do, but.
You're not a senior yet, Mr. Haskin.
The only input I would suggest and encourage the council to take a look is into the deferment. I think when shortly after Friendly Chevrolet closed it up, a gentleman from Manteca went and put in a used car lot. You probably remember him. Maybe you don't. That property was in the county. I mean, it was in the city, but they always were on a septic tank. When he bought it, in order for him to open the business, he had to hook up to the city lines. The city let him to defer that. He had it paid off in about a year, and he ran a successful business. So I think there is some good in that deferment. So as the city attorney pointed out, gives the developer an opportunity not to put all the money up front on the cost. So you defer that out. So I think that's probably a good thing to look at.
I don't know if this is a gated community, if there's a restrictions on how many people can be in these units, or it's just wide open. Is it open? Is there some kind of negotiation that could be made for Escalon first? This isn't going to be one of those subsidized housing, so maybe when you're negotiating, that could be looked into for that first. And there's no ranked rental protection. It's market rate, so it's going to go up every year. So again, careful with the connection fees, which I'm assuming, and we didn't get a chance to talk, there was the rate study that was done for those connection fees indicate the actual cost to the city reviewing and approving these kind of connections?
For the rate study.
For whatever you're going to
Yes.
charge per unit.
Yes.
Okay, so
I understand.
there's some basis there for charging what you charge based on these units. I can remember a gentleman over on Claw who had been in the county, you may remember this is about 10, 12 years ago, and he wanted to tie into the city system, and he got hit with the bill for all the sewer and the water connection fees, and that was, he was connected to some people around town. It was a big bone of contention, and, tough potatoes. The city charged what it charged because that's what it cost the city. So, again, I'm pro-city, and love to see a project like that come in. Seniors move into a smaller unit, you know, younger people can move into a house. All those things are good things. So I think a deferral is, you know, if that's a real bridge for these developers, you know, let them pay back over time, the rents will increase, you know, everybody will get their share. Thank you.
Anybody else? Questions in the audience? Anybody online that has any questions on this topic? Yes, please.
In response to the gentleman, yes, I'd be happy to give preference to Escalon residents. And in speaking with staff previously, I believe that the studies that were created to justify those connection fees were more for a typical multifamily house, not for a senior, because the use is.
You have a quick question. Fees are due and payable when they put a permit to start the build? Is that when those fees are due typically?
Yes, permit issuance.
Permit issuance to start the build. At the point of issuance of a permit to start the build, what is your rough timeline for a build? How long would it take you to finish the project and start collecting rents, if you will? What's an anticipated timeline?
14 to 16 months.
14 to 16 months. So by month 18, from a permit issuance, you'd be collecting pretty much, in theory, full rent for all units?
Yeah.
Okay.
I wouldn't-
Thinking out loud, how long it takes to start generating revenue for this gentleman, if we did a deferral, what we're looking at for when revenue comes in to have a reasonable negotiation on. With revenue coming in, it changes ability to pay and whatnot, so, thank you.
Mr.
Other
Sullivan?
questions?
Yeah, I do. You said that our fees were roughly double what you just paid on the project in Modesto? So what's to stop you from making money and building another project in Modesto rather than build a project here in Escalon?
Yeah, that's the question, yeah. If the fees are too high, it would make more sense for me to go where they're cheaper.
It just makes sense, right? Because we're in business to make money. Right? Even the city, we have to make money to pay our bills. And all of those fees were roughly double from us, so our connection fees,
No.
permit fees.
As an aggregate.
Pardon?
And for the whole fee package, it was.
The whole fee package was roughly double. And, I mean, we're apples for apples, you were
Is that a
4
per-
units with 18.
Per unit cost
It was, yeah.
for
per unit
fees, you're
cost.
saying are double per unit?
Yeah, correct.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, what were you estimating the water to be at?
The water, if you got 18 units and if you were to cut that in half with the request, that's 5,000 a unit times 18, $99,000 at a minimum cost. I'm guessing we're not gonna plug a 3/4 inch line into a facility like that. I'm assuming it's more.
Probably gonna be a 2 or 3.
Yeah, so you're looking at
2 or 3 to each of the 18
No,
units?
for the
2 or 3
for
inch
the
unit.
complex itself.
So if you
Right,
went to a
that's-
3 units, that's 65,000 per unit.
Yeah, I was anticipating like a 3/4 inch landscape line, a 2-inch domestic, and probably a 2 or 3 inch fire line.
That request, if it's a 3 inch line, that's a request of a $1.2 million shaving of cost than if it's a 3 inch line.
Excuse me, but
We have
that's- but
3
that's
water
one-
meters.
Sorry, the sewer connection, the sewer fee was 5,000 per unit, the connection fees were per service.
You have a water service line, a domestic water, and a fire water, so there's 3 water lines coming in.
Oh, okay.
Which was a 3/4, a 2, and a 3.
That's what I anticipate.
Can you repeat that? A 3/4, a 2?
Couple $100,000.
And correct me if I'm wrong on these fees, I believe these are total, not per unit, right? The water connection fee.
I think the water connection fee is.
So if
Oh, okay.
So if he does one,
Sewer
yeah, so if he does 3 connections, it would be, if he did 1 3/4 charge, that'd be 11,000 for the 3/4, and then so on. So if he does a 2 inch and a 3 inch, so we do those, it's not per unit.
Roughly 200K on just the water connection.
Realistically,
So
the total fees are about $472,000, based off my rough estimate. Because you have $220,000
Parks and Rec, 53 on the,
Sewer and then
Sewer.
199 for water.
but you cut that in half because that's 50, not full kick.
I was just doing the full
Okay.
amount.
But yeah, we're in $300,000-$400,000 land for the current ask.
Mr. Mayor, I would like to make a motion to table this discussion until further discussion is had with staff and the applicant to look at a reduction or a possible deferral.
Motion's on the table, looking for a
Yeah, I
second.
think I would second that. I want to see the project happen. So if we can figure out the specifics a little bit more, see where we can make it happen without, taking too big a bite out of our apple, I think that's the way to go.
Any other comments or concern on the motion before we go to a vote? All right, we have a motion and a second on the board here. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Carries 5-0.
And then I will work, or Jalen will work with the applicant to confirm when to bring that item back so he's able to attend that meeting.
Yes. All right. Moving on to number 9, approve a professional service agreement with Four Leaf Inc. in the amount of $123,170 for the preparation of the City of Escalon's 2023 to 31, the 6th cycle of our housing element. Authorize city manager to execute the agreement. Staff, what do we got on that?
Thank you, Mayor. Me again. So the item here is to consider consultant services agreement with Four Leaf, as was mentioned, for the preparation of the city's 6th cycle housing element. State housing law requires the city update their housing element every 8 years. Of note here, previously, due to the city's non-compliance, we submitted about 11 months late during the last cycle. We were on a 4-year cycle compared to an 8-year cycle. With the 6th cycle, state will move everyone, as we understand it, to an 8-year window, so we won't have to sort of do the intervening housing element updates. We'll come back to that issue in just a bit. Cities are required to adequately plan for its fair share of anticipated housing allocations, units. Essentially, a number is created by the state to assess how much housing is needed across the state, and they provide that to the regions, San Joaquin Council of Governments in this case, and the COG, the Council of Governments, distributes that to its member agencies, to all the cities and the county. As I was mentioning, cities are required to adopt this plan. It is the only element or chapter of the general plan, and it is an element of the general plan. It's the only element that is required to be adopted at a statutory timeline, and it's the only element that is specifically reviewed by a state department. So in regards to the number, just share a little bit this cycle compared to last cycle. The region received an allocation of 52,719, the region, units, or 6,200 units per year. That is up 23% compared with the last cycle, 2015 to 2023. Whereas Escalon's allocation actually decreased by 14%. From a total of 425 to 367. So 367 units the city should accommodate over the next 8 years, or about 43 units per year. Now, this number is not just a total number, it is broken into 4 income categories. So we have the 4 income categories here. So below 50% of the AMI, it's called average median income. So if you're making less than 50% of the average median income, this unit is affordable to you. We have 93 of those units that we must accommodate in this number, 58 low-income units, that's between 50 and 80% of the AMI, 64 moderate income units, that's between 80% and 120% of the AMI, and then 152 units above moderate, so over 120% of the AMI. So in the planning stages, the state uses density, so your higher density as a proxy for affordability in the planning stages. So they'll want to see R2 and R3 zone, sufficient R2 and R3 zoning to accommodate these lower income units. So a little bit about the housing element and its increased complexity in the sixth cycle. Certainly the complexity of the document and the expectations of the state. I can say the state used to expect cities to be able to accommodate the units, just, roughly you have enough land and zoning appropriate. Now they're specifically asking for rezonings, more specificity on sites that'll be used, this level of detail to ensure that the jurisdictions are meeting their fair share of housing. All the way from preparation through implementation, and now there's more ramifications for those cities that are non-compliant. And so these issues have certainly increased the city's needs to seek outside help with the document and has increased the costs for these documents. So just touch on a couple of the ramifications if you're non-compliant. If you're non-compliant, submit late, don't follow these kind of the rules or the laws of the state as you're preparing this document and as it's adopted. Potential to lose state grant funding, open yourself up to legal challenges, and the need to implement rezones if necessary in a shorter time frame. There's also an issue that I think the city council should be aware of. It's called builder's remedy. In short, a jurisdiction is prohibited, I'll just kind of read it, from denying an affordable housing project based on project's non-compliance with the jurisdiction's general plan or zoning ordinance. So in essence, you have less discretion to not approve projects, and they are more by right approvals. So that's something when a city doesn't have a compliant general plan, a builder can submit a builder's remedy application kind of, and knowing that the city is non-compliant in their general plan. So just something to keep in mind. So with these issues and ramifications in mind, the city released a request for proposal in early May to seek assistance in the preparation of this plan. The city did receive 5 proposals ranging in cost from $112,000 to $299,000, so a big range. After review of the 5, the city chose to move forward to the interview stage with 3 firms. The local firm, J.B. Anderson Planning, out of Ripon, Modesto area, notified the city that they did not have the staffing resources to complete the task at this time, and so they pulled their name from the hat. So staff did review the 2 remaining firms, also the lowest cost firms, and are choosing to move forward with 4-Leaf at this time, primarily because of the resources they have. They have 40 planners on staff. They have the ability and the knowledge of 6-cycle housing elements, familiarity with HCD and HCD staff to get the city's housing element through the timeline in this very brief now amount of time that we do have. And so that is staff's recommendation at this point, and we'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
I've got a quick question with regard to the deadline and timeline for turning this in. Is somewhere in this contract with 4-Leaf, if they miss a deadline, are they responsible for the city not meeting our required deadline and what that might incur cost to our city?
Yeah, good question. And I know 4-Leaf, well, I believe 4-Leaf is on the phone, and they can speak to some of that. No, I don't think that is in the contract. I will say we are a little late in starting this process for sure, They have promised us through our encouragement that they will do everything they can to meet the statutory deadline. Now, the statutory deadline to submit a plan is December, just slipped my mind, December 31st of this year. There is people don't like to use the term grace period, but there's a 120-day grace period in which we can get that in. So they will work very diligently. 6 cycle housing elements are taking north of a year to complete. So we have a very, very difficult task in front of us. One thing I can speak to is we did, one of the benefits of having doing a housing element 4 years ago is that we are up to speed on some of the state laws that have been adopted since 2017. And I see some questions, so we will answer those questions. So we have done a little bit more than some of the jurisdictions who haven't updated it in 8 years, but we do have a tight timeline ahead of us.
Other questions?
Mr. Mayor, I need to excuse myself for a moment. I'm sorry, I have to pee real bad. Sorry.
Understand.
Can I go this way?
Can I ask a question?
Yes, please.
I was just curious how good they've been at hitting their targets. You know, when they say they're going to do it, do we have any history to suggest they have?
Yeah, so, and we don't have the specific numbers, but they are working on a number of 6 cycle housing elements. They have completed some 6 cycle housing elements as well as 5th cycle housing elements. And as far as we know, and they can speak to it, they've been very good about hitting their timelines. Now, some of the things they don't have 100% control of course, right? You have jurisdiction, you have community members, you have council members, you have, external factors that would play into this timeline. But they've been very successful in their member jurisdictions to get them across the finish line.
Okay. Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
May I
please
address staff? I know this is your item, but I have a question for Dominique.
I won't be offended.
Okay. Well, it's just because you came on board. Did we reach out to De Novo
We did.
and they didn't choose to respond?
They did not.
Okay. So just for the council's information and the public, De Novo did our previous housing element.
Last 2, I believe.
And I'll just provide a little context on that. I know there was kind of this crush of housing elements, and many vendors, many firms were not able to, handle the workload because they're much more complex. And I didn't specifically speak to De Novo, but I did speak to staff who spoke with De Novo, and just there's not enough staff for these firms to go around for every city.
Just for the sake of discussion, these housing elements, when I was on Planning Commission, quite frankly, were a bane of my existence. Because essentially what we are asked to do is to provide this plan to show the state of California that we can accommodate 367 new homes in the city of Escalon. For those audience members, when was the last time you saw 367 new homes being accounted for in the city of Escalon? It's never going to happen. But, so in other words, we are paying 4-leaf, thank goodness for 4-leaf, to provide our housing element to show the state of California that we can accommodate this, but with our slow growth ordinance and our availability of sites to build on, so housing elements are one of my biggest frustrations, but they are one of those boxes that we have to check, because otherwise the state of California can withhold funds from us and make our lives miserable.
Any other questions up here? Anybody out in the audience here that has any questions or comments or concerns? Anybody online?
I agree with Councilman Stroman. I was on the Planning Commission for 10 years. I went through 2 of these cycles, and it was because we were late. The first time that we got on these 4-year cycles to throw out a fantasy plan that the state wanted. This is money for something that doesn't come to fruition for the city of Escalon. De Novo charged $57,000 for their update 4 years ago. And, now we're at, and I don't have anything against Four Leaf or any of these other companies. I'm just saying that the rise there almost equates to a full-time employee for a year. And is the person from De Novo, who is excellent at doing this, available for contract work? I don't know. But, again, money's precious to the city. And if you got nothing else, you got nothing else. But, well, I'd sure look at, what's out there. If there's some freelance contractors, as it's been pointed out, we're pretty close to being up to date. We had the ADUs. I think you're going to have to add the junior ADUs to this next one. The numbers change a little bit, and then whatever laws got changed in the last 4 years have to be incorporated into the plan. And I suggest that you all read it as punishment for having to approve $120-some-odd thousand.
Thanks. Anybody else? All right, any questions for staff or anybody from Four Leaf? Have any questions for Four Leaf?
I have a question. Is there a reason, you had said that this takes about a year typically to complete. Is there a reason that the previous council did not approve going forward last November, maybe, to go ahead and get this done, so we had an appropriate time period to get it done?
So are you meaning from the 4-year cycle to the 8-year cycle?
Well, this is due in December, correct?
Correct.
And it takes about a year to complete. So it would be ordered, it would go forward last November or December or
So it was
before.
just-
So is there a reason that didn't, I just want to be, I would like the knowledge of why this hasn't been
Move forward.
sooner, so that we're not late again, because
Sure,
it sounds like we don't want to be late again.
So originally it was staffing. We were minus a position in that department, with me moving into the city manager's position. And so we have one other staff member in that department, and so her and I working on those things, but then me also working on other things. But then it also came into play in the past. Every time we've done them, they've come in under $50,000, which didn't require contracts to come to the city in accordance with our purchase policies. And so we were receiving informal bids, basically, minimum of 3, reaching out to companies, and everybody was coming back saying, oh, no, we're not going to be able to do this for anything less than this amount. And then when we actually put it out for recruitment, because we saw, or for RFP, because we saw that we were going to have to do it that way, they came in way higher than what was even estimated at that. And so it all comes in term, it was kind of a mixture of everything. But yeah, even the amounts when we were reaching out, the estimates, all of the bids that came in were way higher than what we were originally thinking that they would come in on top of that. And so it's a mixture of all of those things. Yeah.
300,000 is, we don't want the job, but if you give it to us, we'll make money.
And
That's
all of their
ridiculous.
justifications for how much more it was increased is because of the comprehensiveness required and the level of staffing they have to provide to address all the things that the state wants. That was what every single one of them responded with, and why their increase of costs doubled and in some cases tripled was because of what was needed to meet the state requirements.
Even though we but our last update was in 2016.
Our last update was in effective 19, so.
Okay, so if it was 2019, really, I guess, Jalen, I'm not putting you on the spot, but on the 2019 update, wouldn't have that incorporated a lot of the many items that were addressed or passed by law in 2017?
Yeah, it does. There's still some more issues that the city would have to address in this housing element, including the what's called fair housing analysis. And there's other things, but yes, and it was mentioned in the staff report, we are further along than most jurisdictions who haven't done it in the 8 years. So it may not take us a year, it may take us a shorter time frame. We're banking on that, but we're not all the way there.
We're late, do we go back to the 4-year?
So they, it
No, we'll
sounds
just
like they're
have-
getting rid of that.
We'll just have some of the ramifications, potential loss of grants, potential builder's remedy, rezones quicker, 1-year timeframe instead of a 3-year timeframe if we have to do rezones. Have yourself up for legal challenges, those types of things.
Mr. Mayor, I have a question for Four Leaf.
Yes.
Is the representative from Four Leaf on the call?
Yes.
Hi, sir, or ma'am. So did you review the previous cycle housing element?
De novo's housing element, yes.
Okay, so realistically, what's the time frame that you think this is going to take to get adopted or to get compiled? Because we are facing that December 31 deadline.
Yes, we're very aware of that, and we're staffed up to do the very best we can to get you there. The biggest opponent is going to be that there are 6+ months now of mandatory review, public review and HCD review. HCD review alone is 5 months, and that's how much time we have left. And so it's going to be really important to get everything together and get this document adopted and certified by the city as being in compliance, as meeting all the statutory requirements of state law within 120 days of that due date, which is December 31st of this year.
We have until the end of April technically with our grace. Okay, so we have.
With the grace period.
With the grace period. So it sounds like we have 30 to 60 days to get this turned around and out for the 5 months.
That's about the size of it, yeah. You're gonna have to really work fast.
A quick question. How confident are you that you can get this done?
Well, I'm very confident I can get it done. I'm very confident that I can get it certified. The question is, how long does that take? And it really depends on HCD. It depends on the reviewer. We have excellent relationships with our reviewers at HCD, but there may be some things that the city wants to hold on to as far as local control that HCD really pushes the city to get rid of. And you're going to have to make some policy calls. That's your job, right? You're going to have to balance that. You're going to have to make some policy calls as to whether or not you're willing to give up all of the control in order to get something through faster, or whether you're going to go to battle with HCD over a couple of things. My recommendation is going to be that you pick your battles, and you only go to battle with HCD over the things that you think are really important for your community. And we'll uncover what those things are with our stakeholder interviews and our community outreach.
Thank you.
With that, if there's no more questions, then is there a motion that we can put on the table for this item?
Sure. I'll motion to approve a consultant services agreement with Four Leaf Inc. in the amount of $123,170 for the preparation of the City of Escalon's 2023 to 2031 sixth cycle housing element, and authorize the city manager to execute the agreement.
I'll second that.
All right, so we have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries 5-0. We're going to move to item 10, considering the agenda item request from Mayor Pro Tem Hagan and Councilmember Engel regarding goals and objectives to the council.
Thank you, Mayor. Just give me one moment here. So the item before you, as indicated by the mayor, was a agenda item request that was received by staff on July 29th. The discussion basically lists goals that Mayor Pro Tem Hagan and Councilmember Engel were interested in presenting, and so I can put that over to them to review.
Basically, after that budget presentation we had, it became apparent that we were using, an older budget goal approach. And so what I wanted to go ahead and do is put forward some goals that seemed like they had some realistic nature to them, that we could start to create parameters for the town and for our city officials as well as us, to have a direction as a town, like as far as our identity, what's our strengths and weaknesses, making sure that we are being fiscally responsible, as well as looking at helping the community to understand a lot of the reasons why we make the decisions we're making, especially when it comes to things like the unfunded liabilities and the understanding of that process. And so in front of you basically is a list of goals that I felt like were things that we could realistically achieve through this next calendar year in conversation. It's not meant to go into, all the specifics, but to kind of generalize a game plan. So any questions? Sorry.
I have some questions.
Sure, go for it.
So on goal number 1, is this more of a strategic plan or an economic development plan?
It's a combination of both, looking at our strengths and weaknesses as a town, and then based on that, creating a strategic economic game plan that would be playing off those strengths and weaknesses and looking at our abilities to meet those goals.
I know he's brand new to the job, but is this something that Jalen can help us with?
I believe so. I'm confident in him.
I mean, I think that we hired him, and I mean,
Instead of an outside.
instead of having an outside consultant, I think that this is an opportunity, not putting you on the spot, to really let your skill set shine and help the community instead of going out for another consultant.
And I think these are decisions that's where I'm getting at, is we don't have to get into the minutia of it yet.
Okay.
But those would be, decisions we'd make along the way. Speaking with Jalen, I believe he felt that some of this was definitely in his wheelhouse, and then some of it was stuff that he thought may or may not need a consultant's touch. But again, those are things that as a council we could address as we go through that process.
Yeah, in general, I think it was just provided to create the conversation and start to talk about how we can work through these issues. None of these are set in stone saying this is how we want it to be and that's the only way it should be done. To open up that conversation to be able to have good solutions to each one of those goals collectively, not as somebody trying to say this is how it should be. But I think both of us felt that conversation needed to be generated, some action needed to be taken. It's a first step in trying to solve some of these issues. I'm definitely open to feedback, creative ideas, anything that would like to be added. It's definitely up for discussion. Would like to address each one of those goals and be able to move forward with at least some of them, with backing from some of the council, but it had to be presented in such a way that you guys could at least take a look at it and express back to us what your thoughts are. And hopefully we can get some of these things on the agenda and start moving forward to solve some of these issues.
My other question is, what about the goals from last year that weren't achieved, such as senior housing, surface water project, wastewater treatment plant upgrades, rec programs? Are you proposing that these goals are in addition to those goals from last year that we didn't achieve?
Yeah, they can be, absolutely.
I don't think we should be changing anything from prior councils. Those are projects in the works.
Yeah.
There's money already been spent on projects. We're anticipating spending more on those. I don't think that we should be changing any of the ongoing projects that are on the list of goals for CIP. They're ongoing.
Yeah,
I mean, looking at goal 3 and 4, there's not exactly, shall we say, money to be spent there. It's an education and it's a change in process.
Correct.
With those two, and I think those two are something that, in my opinion, we should be bringing up in, say, March. Kind of hammer out a process, or February or March, as we go to the next budget cycle, to go through those and hash out a plan with those. I think that's something we can do for sure. I'm on board with goal 2 of working on the interfund loans. I've been talking with staff prior to our budget of looking at that probably 6-8 months ago, with the idea we need to start coming up with an analysis of that and what we can possibly do to make movement on those, to make those solvent again and square those accounts up, because it's gonna become a problem at some point real quick, I think, if we don't come up with a plan. So I think, you know, sooner than later, that's something I think we should be looking at. So in general terms, I don't have anything with an overall process myself with these ideas. Obviously, more conversation in the future as we get closer to some of these things for me. You know,
That's kind of how I was looking at it.
I think we're all gonna have some variation of an idea for each of these and work together to a nice solution, I think would be pretty good for us.
That's kind of what I was thinking, is trying to get enough specifics in there to have a conversation, but also leave it open so that collectively we're making a decision as a whole group, you know, as a team, so to speak.
May I?
Yes, please.
Okay. I like all 4 of the goals. I just feel like it's a huge agenda item, and maybe that each of these 4 goals will be 4 different spots on an agenda, and maybe not all at the next meeting.
Oh, yeah,
I'm
absolutely.
definitely for a conversation on all of them, and I think number 1, we've even started with the addition to Jalen to the team, and the conversations that we've been having, we're starting to put that together. Number 4 there, I think we've been in a conversation of a better process and calendar of what we want to do for our budget. It does need to start before March, in my opinion, because we do need to make sure those things are on the agenda and we have that mid-year budget going at the right time, and we're having that discussion at the right time. That's going to be kind of on that agenda and what we're doing in that calendar. But all 4 of, and honestly, let's see, number 3, can be done sooner than later. It is an informational piece. Just request staff to give a formal explanation about the general reserves and where we came to the rationale of how much we keep there and when that happened, and just all of those things there. 4 should be opened up though, because there are some other ideas.
Absolutely. So what I was kind of doing is just throwing a general game plan that was real loose together. I think we would look at all of each other's ideas and decide collectively what's the best way moving forward. And so like at the very beginning, at the very top, there's kind of a little blurb on, you know, why these goals and the idea of that, like you had said, they're not meant to be done on one agenda. They're meant to be things that we're targeting through the year in different ways, at different times.
Okay, it does say formally request at the next meeting a discussion of the 4 goals. So what I'm saying is probably that's going to be a very long conversation if we tried to get all 4 goals in one meeting, but we might want to split those up.
I'm sorry, it was to
yeah.
formally
Put it on this
propose these.
Oh, this
yeah,
meeting and
yeah.
talk about these
For this
4?
Put them out there.
Correct.
So is this to put it on future agendas? Is that what we're doing right now?
So
or
this
we-
is basically to advise the council of the goals that Mayor Pro Tem Hagan and Councilmember Engel have, and then, yeah, moving forward, addressing each of these goals this fiscal year. So from my standpoint, with staffing and such, goal number 1 is the one that will probably take us the longest. You know, it's Jalen taking the lead, and then me providing that backup in developing some type of SWOT analysis, strategic economic plan of sorts, bringing that draft to council, you know, doing things we normally did, workshops, those type of things, to get the community's feedback and buy-in, as well as council. And then at some point, Jalen will probably identify items where he would either indicate we should probably use a consultant for specific things. If you're looking at market rate analysis, business, bringing businesses in, more specifics where you have a professional that's very, very knowledgeable in those things. Jalen's very knowledgeable in those things, and he's worked in places that, you know, are larger and therefore have more resources and more things going on in those communities. And so I'm comfortable with however he proposes taking the lead and presenting it to council at that time. So that's probably the one that I would think would take the longest.
Can I just add there?
Sure.
Okay. So I think the way I'd want to, you know, kind of approach it is we will meet the objectives of the council, And that may take different forms as we go along. So, this is both a strategic plan and an economic development plan. I think as Dominique was indicating, as we get into it, trying to accomplish what the council is trying to accomplish, it'll become clear to both parties, staff and council, what we can do in-house and what we can't do in-house. And I think we will guide staff, me, and the rest of the management staff will guide council through the process, changing and morphing and shifting as the council directs. And I think, if it's what I have in my head, I think we can do a large majority of that in-house. If it starts to shift because, community input or council is getting a different take on some things that we do and it, goes to more consultant realm, then that's a decision we can make collectively.
And then regarding goal number 2, which was, to address those items, that's something I'm planning on addressing as much as I can when the budget comes before council next month. So in September, we have a finance professional that's going to help us complete the budget and audit. And at that time, he's already been advised that these are items that have come up in concern. He's looking into all of them. And he's very, very good at providing that type of information. And so that we should be able to address right around budget time, including some type of, I've asked him to put together some type of like payback. How much can the city put every year towards those things? And so he's definitely looking at that right now and plans to have that proposed to council either with the budget or shortly thereafter the budget's completed. Goal number 3, or that was item number 3, I apologize.
That was 2.
Oh, no, that was 2. And then 3 as well, same thing, addressing that at budget time, formal explanations on general fund reserves. I know we've talked about it a lot, but everybody has a different way of explaining it. He is really, really good at explaining things really, really well. And so I think that will go over very well, and that it will be very clear at that point.
And is that, did you say?
Same time around budget.
Okay, so
Budget
September,
adoption,
we
so
should
we're looking
plan
at the
that?
first meeting in September, yeah, is potentially what we're looking at. And then for item number 4, so this is an item, when all the stars align and everything's fully staffed, and we're not running into delays in different areas, your mid-year budget is coming to you in January, February. We shoot for that January, sometimes it hits February. So past practice and practice, when you're able to complete things and you have all your staffing is right when mid-year budget's done, you're working on putting together that new budget. And so at that time, it's been indicated by council, we've got the audit would typically come in around that time as well. And then we were bringing up budget items and knowing that this council wants a more interactive process, wants to conduct a separate workshop and provide additional information and time. At that time, we would come back to council after mid-year budget and we can discuss process at that time or sooner. But that's the minimum that I'd be looking to bring that item over to you is when mid-year budget's completed, which mid-year budget should be completed on time.
It would be nice to have that process in place at mid-year budget, so
Or at mid-year
it
budget,
allowed
we could do that
time
as well.
to have those functions in place when we were ready to start, rather than trying to put it together. If it was a
Sure.
multi-month process, then we're really pushing that deadline to year end.
Okay, yeah, we could do that at mid-year budget. If you're all in agreement with that, I can run them both at the same time.
I'm not sure we're necessarily
Well-
depressed, because mid-year is a review and approval of where we're standing. It's not a change to the current budget. I'm not sure we need to have ad hoc committees made for a mid-year budget. It's more for the annual budget.
Yeah,
process.
correct. Just the
You know.
process in place for the annual
Okay,
budget,
so
not
we can
just
for the
move
mid-year.
forward.
Yeah, mid-year, I don't see a need for that,
No.
but, yeah,
I agree.
then, okay.
It would just be providing the guidance to staff so that we hit all those milestones and make sure that all the things that the council is wanting and asking for, that we're able to achieve them in an appropriate amount of time, have time to be able to schedule them out and complete them as necessary. So that's how I would think, where we could, I believe, with the exception of that first goal, which has to do with the strategic plan, that the other goals would definitely be able to be done in this fiscal year. And then the first goal, like what Jalen was saying, bouncing back and forth, brainstorming, feedback, workshops, working collectively, and so that would be more of a process. Shooting to get it done by the end of the year, but if it takes longer, it takes longer, and that just depends on what's coming up and how it's being addressed.
I think that, yes, this is meant to just get us moving in the right direction.
Correct, yeah,
So, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem, are you kind of looking at these as like workshop settings where we say, okay, today we're going to do a workshop and we're going to talk about the reserves? Or is this a portion within a council meeting that we would go about this? I mean, how do you envision getting the public input?
It depends on what we're talking about. So I think those are the types of things I want to get brainstorming so that we have an actual process. So that as we go through this calendar year, we're developing that process, and hopefully then future councils would then have a process that they could follow that made the constituents happy, and understanding, what's being spent where, why are we making the decisions we're making, understanding that there is a process, in other words. So, and to answer your question, I don't know exactly all the specifics at this time. This is just meant to be a kind of a general game plan.
I would say a discussion with the general fund happening a little bit prior to, obviously, a budget discussion. Otherwise, it's too early, and, it's nice when it's fresh when you go in to look at a budget. So I would say the timeline for something like that is around a budget for me.
Mm-hmm. And those are definitely things that we would just decide as a group moving forward, is what I'm thinking.
I'll throw my input in there real quick. So I think we covered items 2 and 3. Those come around budget review. Item 1 is a longer process. So the only other real one that looks like there's some discussion around is 4. My opinion on that is as council needs to make the decision as council which direction we want to go to make that more readily available and clear for the public. We've muddied up the water a ton with the additional conversations and getting off in the weeds where we've all seen what the problems are and have opinions on what those solutions are. We need to put our heads together, come up with those solutions and present them to our constituents, not have additional meetings to get feedback, to have some more meetings to have feedback. Like, we're up here, we were elected by our constituents. Let's make some decisions, make some things happen.
Yeah, I would like to see, I think someone said milestones, but a policy on number 4 so that we do have those hit milestones at certain times, or at least a goal of what we're trying to do. I'm hoping to get our budget back on track so that we don't have a mid-year in May, like get that back on track so that it's back in January. And I'd like that to be something that's a milestone that we should probably put on there earlier than January, right? And as well as the audit, and I'm hoping that the audit gets back on track, that also comes in January before we're trying to pass another budget, while we're waiting on our last audit still.
So maybe having a meeting that, does specifically address this one goal as, like you said, one meeting type thing, or multiple meetings if that's what it takes, as far as up here, but hammering out a game plan, like what's our process, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, create a calendar, create a timeline, some milestones, what we're trying, the goals of what we want to get. I do like having some sort of meeting of what the budget is looking for the next year in, May. So it's like you hit that mid-year in January, you kind of see the preview of the budget in May so we can get the approval, the conversation going, and then the approval in June. So you're, hoping to hit those, but if we're already in May, then it's hard to schedule that when you don't have any forethought of that. And so just like making that timeline, making that policy so that we know what we're trying to hit.
And I think that can be done. I just think that we just had some weird circumstances this last year, and as we move forward, hopefully that'll flatten out and things will get much better.
Yeah. I think we should have that as some sort of discussion on an agenda, maybe in the next few months coming up, trying to discuss what a policy would look like or what a timeline with some milestones would look like for us. I know that when we went for the training with League of California Cities, there were some examples of some other cities and what they had. And I think we can take a look at what some other cities have and maybe take those as a guideline of what we can do and make sure that we have those milestones to try and reach.
Sounds good to me. Any other questions from council
Or even the audience, I
or
guess,
the
at this point?
audience, or? We're good?
It's nice that you have talking about having a guideline, a roadmap, but I think it's very simple to take care of the mid-year budget in January. And right after that, by February or March, get a hold of someone to do the audit, if that's what you're going to do the audit, get that back, and then by April or May, you could already have your budget workshop. So I think it's just very simple. I don't think you have to take a lot of time and make it a roadmap. It just said on January, mid-year review, February, March, get the audit started, and don't fall behind like the last time, and just proceed from there. I mean, if you're talking about the budget, mid-year review, budget workshop, budget approved by the 30th of the month of June, so it's just that simple. I think just jot down on the calendar. Ooh. Okay, that's it.
It should be that simple.
Okay.
Right, but the audit's not, yeah, right, and so the audit doesn't take a week. I mean, it just, it's a process, and whoever's in the staff directing the auditor is also, they're.
January, mid-year review, and then right to the audit and the
yeah,
budget workshop.
That's the goal.
So at this point, were we looking for general direction for staff at this point? I don't think there's anything on the table to vote on necessarily. I think they're all good ideas to decision. I think we need to keep in our forefront to stay on top of this. I would probably, for timeline, I would task staff and work through the financial timeline and come back with some proposed dates of a plan for a timeline. And go from there to see what's realistic for you folks to work on that, instead of us dictating what we want. I'd like to see what's capable and what's typically what we've been doing, and how do we line that up, and then come back to us with that.
Okay, I can read that.
And as we get to closer dates, then we can dial in,
Yeah,
a process on board.
That sounds fair to me. Does anyone else object to that, or?
I think these are great ideas. Gives us a roadmap. I just want to make sure that we're continuing with the discussion with the other goals from previous councils, that, like, we don't lose sight of those goals as well.
Correct. These are meant to be additions, things that, in seeing that budget goal that came forward last time, it was apparent there were a few things that were missing. And that's why this is here today.
And number 11 is our next topic that we'll go over our council goals and CIP projects.
Yeah, so.
Give a quick rundown on that before the alarm goes off on us here.
Yeah, so I was just gonna say, I realize we're getting late. That is something, it was gonna be presentation, discussion. If the council wants me to, we can move that to the next meeting. That way it's not staying late unless otherwise.
I think that might be a best idea, so we can have a clearer head as this meeting
We'll
is
go ahead
at
and
3+ hours at this point.
Continue item 11 to the next council meeting.
Moves us to council communications and future agenda items. Councilman Stroman tonight, what you got?
In the interest of time, just want to say, Jalen, thanks for hitting the ground running. Obviously, you're rocking and rolling, and we appreciate it. For those of you in the audience, thanks for sticking with us. It's definitely a late one. And for those online, thanks for hanging with us too. And I guess next Wednesday is the last farmers market of the year. So go out and please support the last farmers market of the year.
Great. Councilman Engel.
Okay. First, I want to say that I'm huge, oh wait, can I speak on the Orlando's thing since I was part of the planning commission and that's done? Can I?
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. I'm hugely disappointed at how that went. It's my opinion, that gentleman manipulated our system multiple times and just said what we wanted to hear at each meeting to get ultimately what he wanted, and we did a disservice to a resident of this town for a business to come in and push his way around, and ultimately, if he wanted to tear that fence down right now and look at his backyard, he has every right to. And I'm disappointed in us as council making that decision. Frank, I'm going to ask you a question about a city building, or if it is a city building. Is the library considered a city resource?
Is the library owned by the county?
So the
I'm
library building is owned by the city of Escalon, and we lease it out to San Joaquin County / City of Stockton Library Services. So they operate the program, staff it, and everything. All we do is give them the building.
So it is not a city asset?
It is.
Or city resource, I'm sorry.
City building.
resource.
It's a city building.
Is it considered a city resource? So I'm just bringing this up because it was brought to my attention that one of our council members had a meeting with the residents of our town, and some people were invited, some people were not invited. It was kind of a public meeting where, from what I hear from our community, people were invited and told other people not to tell other people because they didn't want them to show up at such meeting. Other government officials were present. Another city council member was present. I believe this question came to somebody in staff because on the 31st, I received an email basically outlining what our guidelines are as public officials. And part of that said, so long as you do not use city resources to do so, including staff, buildings, or other city resources, and do not act or take action or imply or represent you are acting or taking action on behalf of the city and or the city council. So I'm just trying to get clarification on if our city council or if our city library is considered in that being staff, buildings, or city resources.
So it's run by the county, and they allow their buildings or rooms to be rented by any member of the public at no charge. So you would contact the library directly to do so, and if they have that availability, they'll schedule you in. So anybody from the public can go in, book the room or tables or however they go about doing it, and do something there, and it's free of charge.
So just to clarify, this is the part that I'm getting at, it is or is not a city resource? Is or is not?
It's a city, I'm not trying to be coy at all. It's a city building. But for purposes of the email that you're describing, the question is whether it's a city, whether you are using a city resource for purposes of your own private activity, right?
So holding a public meeting, inviting the public to discuss city issues, and inviting other government officials.
I mean, any council member can meet with any combination of his constituents and other elected officials.
I know, I
they
get that
want,
part,
yeah.
but I'm asking in relation to the building, and I know you said you're not trying to be coy.
Yeah.
But I think for me, the answer is simple for me to justify in my head onto whether it is or is not a city resource.
I guess the use of the library facility is up to the county agency that runs that. So to answer your question.
Out of jurisdiction, that would be a
Yes.
county resource.
Yes.
Of the city.
Correct.
Yes.
That answers my question.
And I'm not trying to also be, I answered your question, so you knew I wasn't trying to shut you down. But we really can't get into substantive discussions for council member reports on things that haven't been agendized. I answered that, so you knew I wasn't gonna just say that as a shield to not address the issue. But going forward, it's important that council member reports are used for brief updates or reports, not for substantive policy discussions.
Not for inquiries of council or staff? Because it was an inquiry to council.
Just, yeah, I mean, listen, a quick question is probably okay, but more of a complicated issue when we know we're also, anyways,
I thought it was a quick question as far as, is the library a city resource or is it not? So if it was not, the answer was no. I appreciate your response. Thank you. That's all I have.
Councilman Walker.
Thanks for hanging in there, everybody. I do want to address Ann Shaddix's comment during public comment. She had brought up the skate park and the many years that we've been, or that Escalon Parks Foundation has been raising money for the skate park. It is Escalon Parks Foundation is a nonprofit in our community who has proposed bringing a skate park to Escalon, and is not an actual city project. It's from Escalon Parks Foundation, which is a separate nonprofit. They're the ones that run a fireworks booth. There's the ones that are raising money for that, and they are a nonprofit. So nonprofits usually they raise money and then they contribute to their community. And so we're waiting for that contribution as well. But in their bylaws, they are supposed to be updating us on their financials. So then they also are supposed to be holding their annual meeting in November, where our city manager is to sit in on that. So I would like to know if staff can reach out to Escalon Parks Foundation, and then we can get that financial update, and then see where they're at that. I know that their bylaws also say that meetings are held in city chambers, but they don't. So I would like to know just an update on where their progress is, and if this still is a thing that they want to do, because our community members would like to know if they're still moving forward on this project, what a timeline is, and if they are still communicating with council and all of that on that. So I'd love an update, so if we could do that.
Council's good with me moving forward with that?
Anything else?
Enjoy the farmer's market and stay cool out there, and again, appreciate everybody coming out, so thanks.
Mayor Pro Tem Hagan.
I think tonight was a pretty productive meeting. Staff, I think you're doing a great job, so keep it up. I know it's not easy with taking over something and trying to get it going in the right direction, so I do see what you're doing from my standpoint. I also have a question that was given to me by a constituent in regards to the meeting that you had, John, Councilman Stroman. And it's not a question I can answer, so I'm giving it to you.
Sure.
It's a real simple one. They're concerned with you, being a Republican and looking at transparency. There's a very big concern they're having with why you would be pushing a rent control in a secretive type meeting and not inviting the rest of council when clearly you can, if given 72 hours of public advance time.
I allowed to respond, Frank?
I would appreciate that, unless you don't want to.
You can respond, but let's keep the discussion. We'd have to agenda this separately, have a full-throated discussion.
Okay.
I'll give you a little bit of leash though to respond.
Okay. So I was going to, first of all, for clarification, it was not a public meeting, okay? It was not a public meeting. It was not a secret meeting, okay? There are issues at Almond Grove that I felt that the residents of Almond Grove, the number one concern that we are hearing out of Almond Grove is anonymity. They're afraid to talk. And so that's why it wasn't done in secret. It was, hey, we know you're concerned about your anonymity. So, and it was suggested by Congressman Harder's office to bring the parties together at his town hall meeting a couple months ago, or his office hours. And so I reached out to our supervisor. I reached out, Ann Shaddix and I reached out to our supervisor, to our assembly member, our senator, and our congressman. 3 of the 4 had representatives at that meeting. And it wasn't a rent control, it was more so a town hall type meeting asking how we can help or how our elected officials can help. I was going to notify all 4 of the rest of you, but I was advised by both staff and city attorney, that I was not permitted to, because that would have been a violation of the Brown Act. And so Counselor Walker was included in that meeting. She was invited to that meeting. She could have showed up. She didn't have to show up. But the original agenda item that was brought before council was to talk about a rental stabilization ordinance. And I thought for continuity's sake, it was important for Counselor Walker to listen to what the assembly member had to say. Would I have preferred all five of you to be there, all five of us, the four of you to be there in attendance? Of course I did. But I was advised by the city attorney and the city manager to not bring it up. And
Council and staff, can you respond to that, please? Because you're being accused of a council member right now of telling him that he could not invite us to a public meeting.
Was not a public meeting.
Was the public there? You called it a town hall, sounds like a public meeting.
I will just simply respond and say, listen, obviously, we all know the Brown Act says you can't discuss substance with more than 2 other council members on a 5-member. That's the basic Brown Act rule.
He said that you advised him to not invite us. Is that or is that not true?
I was the one that spoke to him, and if it was taken that way, then I must have not said it correctly. My interpretation when I was speaking to Councilmember Stroman was, I know you want to invite them, but they're not able to attend, because if you have more than 3 show up, it's a Brown Act violation. And so at that point, you'd have to ask people to leave. And that was, now I didn't go in further, and maybe I should have explained more. But that was the focus, was if there's 3 or more of you present, it becomes a public meeting that we don't have an agenda for. And so at that point, you'd have to ask.
On July 31st, the email that I received that outlaid those rules, which is in kind of opposition to what you're saying, did he also receive the same email on July 31st?
Correct. It was sent out to all of you.
So, did you not read that email, Councilman Stroman?
Yes.
So in there, it clearly does state the ability to have been able to do that, right? But you're saying that you got direction to not do so, where it does state in there, right? Any such meetings where a quorum of the city council, 3 council members are present to discuss or listen must be advertised publicly 72 hours in advance to be a legal meeting. So that was it. That was the requirement.
If there were 3 in attendance.
That was the requirement.
Okay.
So that was given to you. So you had that information. So
And
just
then
want to make sure that transparency is a big thing for you.
And at the last meeting, staff said, do not bring it up. Do not bring it up. Okay.
Apparently it got brought up, because I got a random email sent to me along with the rest of the council, because it was brought up.
I appreciate it, but
Getting in the weeds here.
we can't, if we want to discuss this, we're going to have to agendize it later.
I'd like to put it on the agenda.
I'll second that.
That's on the agenda. Was there anything else you wanted to bring up for tonight?
No, other than that, I apologize for the contentiousness of it, but the truth has to be out there. It's the truth.
Okay, I'll keep it short and simple. Supervisor Collins, I appreciate all the efforts with Caltrans. Stay on top of them so we don't get it pushed out. It'll be cold before you know it, and they're gonna use that excuse to push us to next year. So, a couple weeks in advance, 3 weeks in advance, who's coming in, when, start pressing a little bit more if you could to make sure they stay online. You've been doing a great job with it, so just keep up the good work. National Night Out was great. We had 2 routes this year instead of just 1. That was awesome. Looking forward to next year. Maybe we end up having even more stops. It's a great event on both sides. Guess I missed out on my own neighborhood party. That's okay. I've seen others. It's all right. And then, yeah, echoing the sentiments, go buy your vegetables last time for the farmer's market on Wednesday. So show up, support our vendors so we have a reason for them to come back the next time as well when we have the next season come around for that. With that, we're going to go ahead and close the meeting out. We're going to go out to closed session, and we'll come back if there's anything reportable. We have 24 minutes before the alarm goes off, so let's hustle bustle here.
All right.